The Bloody Code, a novel by Resh. Bloodcan. Names, characters, places, and incidents either are products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual events, awake howls, or persons, living or dead, is entirely coincidental. The geopolitical situations depicted are inspired by documented real-world events in northern Nigeria. No character represents any specific real person. For permissions or inquiries, contact the publisher. For the farmers, the fishermen, the pastors, the teachers, the mothers. For everyone who has held the line in the Northeast and the Middle Belt, paying with everything they had, asking only to be left in peace on the land their ancestors put in their hands. And for Elia Sharibu, still waiting, still praying, we have not forgotten. A note on truth and fiction. This novel is fiction. Gwoza is real, a town at the base of the Mandara Mountains that has been attacked, partially destroyed, and partially rebuilt multiple times in the past decade. The Sambisa Forest is real, a vast, dense expanse of woodland in Borno state that became infamous as the operational base of Boko Haram, and later ISWAP, the Islamic State, West Africa province. Lake Chad is real. The displacement camps in and around Maiduguri are real, housing hundreds of thousands of people. The pattern of coordinated displacement followed by the arrival of mining equipment in the newly cleared land. This pattern has been documented by journalists, human rights organizations, and investigative researchers. The connection between illegal artisanal mining and armed violence in the Lake Chad Basin has been the subject of multiple reports. I have drawn on these reports heavily. Iya Sharibu is a real person. She was kidnapped by Boko Haram from her school in Dapchi, Yobe State, in February 2018, when she was 14 years old. At the time of this writing, she remains in captivity, reportedly because she refused to renounce her Christian faith. She is not a symbol I have invented. She is a girl whose name deserves to be said. The Chibok girls are real. 276 girls kidnapped from the government girls' secondary school in Chibok, Borno State, in April 2014. Many remain unaccounted for. The tactic of integrating so-called repentant Boko Haram fighters into the Nigerian military, Operation Safe Corridor, is real. The security vulnerabilities this has created have been documented. I have tried to hold all of this truthfully. I have tried to give the people of the north of Nigeria, of all the regions depicted, of all the ethnic communities named, their full humanity, their complexity, their grief, and their extraordinary, daily resistance. The love at the center of this story is real too. It is harder to document than displacement and violence, but it is there, in the same places, happening at the same time. This book is an attempt to hold both. Prologue. Sambisa Forest, Borno State, Nigeria, 3:17 a.m. The man prayed with his hands bound behind his back. His lips moved. No sound came out. Sound required breath, and breath required a rib cage that had not been methodically introduced to a rubber hose for 11 days running. 3 of his ribs were fractured. He knew this because he had asked. In the clinical way you ask about something that is now simply information rather than distress, and the guard who had laughed at the question had told him, still laughing, too. The guard had miscounted by 1. Caleb could tell. The 3rd fracture announced itself every time the night air shifted and his body moved involuntarily in his sleep, a white pain that was, by now, simply part of the atmosphere of this place, like the smell and the sound of the forest. The forest. The Sambisa, at 3 a.m. was not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence, of vast, breathing, living dark that surrounded the compound with the casual indifference of something that had been here long before the compound and would be here long after. Insects maintained their incessant liturgy. An owl somewhere in the canopy conducted its low territorial declaration. Occasionally, further away than he could determine, something large moved through undergrowth, with the unhurried confidence of an animal at the top of its food chain. He'd been in the cell for 11 days. He had counted them by the quality of the light that came through the gap at the base of the door, the particular gray that preceded dawn, the white of midday, the amber of dusk, the absolute black of night, 11 cycles. On the 5th day that they had brought him the hijab, Zainab's hijab, the pink one with the silver embroidery that she had bought in the Gwaza market 3 months before the attack, and told him, in Hausa, in the flat and administrative tone of people conveying procedural information, that his sister had been formally absorbed into the caliphate. They used that word, absorbed, as if she were a quantity of liquid disappearing into dry ground. He had not been able to scream properly. The ribs would not permit it. What came out was something less than a scream, and more than silence, and the guards on the other side of the wall had laughed again, and he had understood then that his grief was, to them, simply another form of the content they were here to produce. He tracked a single ant across the dirt floor of his cell with his one functioning eye. The left had swollen shut on the 4th day, and had been, since then, a region of the body he tried not to inventory. The ant was moving with purposeful confidence toward a crack in the mud brick wall, where some ancient and obscure ant economy was evidently being conducted. The ant did not deviate. It did not hesitate. It moved with the serene, brainless certainty of something operating entirely within the parameters of its design, and Caleb Pam, 28 years old, pastor of the Gwaza Baptist congregation, commander of the Savannah Lions militia, watched this small, dark, purposeful creature with something close to envy, to know exactly what you were built for, to move toward it, without doubt. He had known, once. He had known it in the particular way that young pastors know things, with the clean, uncomplicated certainty of someone whose faith has not yet been brought into contact with the specific weight of the world. He had stood at pulpits in his one good shirt and preached the love of God to people who needed it, and he had believed every word, believed it with the straightforward confidence of a man who has never had reason not to. And then the motorcycles had come, and then Zainab's hijab, and then 7 months of making men lethal, which had been, he now understood, the process by which he had made himself into something his former self would not have recognized, something that the man in the one good shirt would have been frightened of. He thought about this with the detached clarity that extreme physical distress sometimes produces, the body in too much pain to generate the usual protective distortions, the mind forced into a kind of brutal honesty at the absence of any alternative. He had become what he fought, not in the obvious way, not in the way of cruelty or ideology, but in the more subtle and perhaps more dangerous way. He had allowed the war to define him. He had let the darkness set the terms, and had fought on its terms, which meant, he saw this now, in the cold light of 3 a.m., in a terrorist cell, that the darkness had won a more significant victory than it knew. The ant disappeared into the crack. Caleb closed his eye. He heard footsteps. Not the random, territorial footsteps of the guards making their irregular rounds, which he had catalogued over 11 days into a pattern that he could have mapped to the minute. These footsteps were different. They had direction. They had arrival in them. Commander Tariq, he understood, would be coming at dawn. And dawn, the gray that preceded dawn, was already beginning to separate itself from the black at the base of the door, was perhaps 2 hours away, perhaps less. He did not pray for rescue. He had exhausted that particular form of prayer somewhere around the 8th day, when the systematic quality of what was happening to him had clarified into something beyond the category of events that rescue addresses. He had moved through anger, and through bargaining, and through something that was not quite despair, but was in that neighborhood, and had arrived finally at the place beyond petition. He prayed the way you breathe when the body has stopped asking permission. He prayed with the last coherent intention available to him, not for anything specific, not with any expectation of result, but with the pure, exhausted orientation of someone who has run out of every other option and is turning, by reflex and training in something deeper than either, to face whatever comes next. He prayed the way a man prays when he is about to die, and the darkness in the cell changed, not the physical darkness. The physical darkness remained complete, thick, absolute, the particular darkness of a room designed to disorient. But another kind of darkness, the interior darkness, the one he had been carrying for 7 months, like a stone inside his chest. That darkness began, inexplicably and without announcement, to become different. Not lighter, different, the way a room becomes different when someone enters it, even before you hear the sound. Something was in the room with him. Something that had not been there before, or had been there and was only now, in the specific extremity of this moment, with his defenses entirely exhausted, available to his awareness. He did not know yet what it was. He would know, very shortly. 43 miles northwest of his cell, 12 men were moving through wet sawgrass in absolute silence, their faces blackened, their breathing controlled, their hearts performing extraordinary quantities of work for reasons that had nothing to do with physical fitness. A former army sergeant who had once told Caleb that God was a comfort for people who could not face reality was leading them. His name was Obina Okafor, and he was moving with the focused, anguished love of a man who has made a mistake he cannot undo and is attempting to spend the rest of his available time compensating for it. An American man named Elias Vance was in a room in Maiduguri, watching a thermal display and breaking, at last count, 17 separate regulations of the bilateral security agreement between the United States and the Federal Republic of Nigeria, and finding, to his own surprise, that this bothered him less than he would have predicted. A woman named Kemi Adeyemi was sitting in her uniform in the nurse's station at the University of Maiduguri Teaching Hospital, not working, not sleeping, simply sitting in the fluorescent light with her hands in her lap, and the specific expression of someone who has done something irreversible and is in the process of locating the self that must live with it. None of these people knew what was happening in the cell. None of them knew that in the cell something had changed, but they were all, in their different ways, moving toward it. This is a story about what happened next. Part 1. The Descent into Darkness. Chapter 1. The Last Good Sunday. Gwoza, Borno State. 8 months earlier. The church smelled of old wood, new rain, and the particular brand of rosewater talcum powder favored by the elderly women of the Gwoza Baptist congregation, who arrived 1 full hour before service and arranged themselves in the front 3 pews, with the unhurried territorial confidence of generals occupying strategic high ground. It was a modest building, this church. Elder Daniel Pam had helped construct it 30 years ago, when Caleb was not yet alive to understand what it meant to build a place of God with your own hands, to set each mud brick with the weight of intention behind it. The ceiling was low and strung at intervals with bare bulbs that ran off a generator that coughed and stuttered every 20 minutes before settling back into its reluctant rhythm. The windows were louvered, and on mornings when the harmattan had given way to the brief seasonal mercy of cloud, the light that came through them was the soft, diffuse gray of a world not yet decided on its mood. This was one of those mornings. Pastor Caleb Pam, with mid-sentence, mid-gesture, his right hand extended with the palm upward, a habit he had developed somewhere in his first year of ministry, and had never managed to self-correct, the open hand of someone offering something and asking you to consider whether you want it, when his congregation's attention began, collectively and by degrees, to migrate away from him. He noticed it, the way a pastor notices such things, not by looking, but by feeling. The quality of the attention changed. 30 years of Sunday school had given Elder Daniel Pam's son a fine-grained sensitivity to the acoustics of a room full of people. The way that focused attention has a texture that distraction does not. Distraction was moving through the room right now, row by row from back to front. a cold wind finding its way under a door. He paused. He lowered his hand. He heard it. Not the individual elements, not the separate engines, not the creak and pop of each frame as each motorcycle hit the unpaved road that ran past the church's western wall. What he heard was the aggregate, the low, swarming, biological sound of many engines moving together toward a single point, the sound of a purpose that was not their own. His congregation had heard this sound before. The older members had heard versions of it going back a decade. The knowledge of it was written into their bodies, into the way shoulders rose and heads turned, and hands found the hands beside them, the involuntary, animal choreography of a community that has learned, the hard way, what this sound precedes. In the third pew from the back, Caleb's younger sister, Zainab, turned to find his eyes across the full length of the church. She was 16, in the pink hijab with the silver embroidery she had bought in the market 3 weeks ago, and had worn it every Sunday since. Her face in this moment was doing several things at once: the initial alarm, the practiced suppression of alarm, and beneath both, something that was neither alarm nor suppression, but the clear, frightened love of the younger sibling looking at the only family member between herself and whatever was coming through the door. He looked back at her. He tried, in that half-second of eye contact, to communicate everything. Stay down. Stay calm. I am here. It will be all right. He did not believe the last part. He was already not believing it, because the sound outside had multiplied, and was very close now, and had acquired, beneath the engine noise, other sounds that his body identified before his mind did. His father stood up from the front pew. Elder Daniel Pam, 63 years old, former primary school headmaster of Gwoza Lea School, deacon, and then elder of this church for 28 years, a man who had read the entire Bible through 22 times, and whose margin notes in his worn Hausa language Bible filled every available white space in every book from Genesis to Revelation. This man rose from his seat at the first pew, walked to the pulpit, from which he had heard his son preach, and stood there with his arms spread wide. Not wide in the gesture of welcome, though it looked like that. Wide in the gesture of something older and more primal, the widening of the body to occupy space, to make yourself large, to place yourself between something you love and something coming to harm it. It was an absurd gesture. It was a completely human gesture. It was the most magnificent thing Caleb had ever seen his father do, and he had seen his father do many magnificent things. The windows came in first. The blast of the first petrol bomb through the east window shattered the louvers and sent a fan of flame along the eastern wall with a sound like the tearing of something large and irreparable. The screaming began simultaneously with the second window, on the western side, so that the congregation was suddenly, catastrophically, between two walls of fire and a single blocked exit. Caleb did not remember making the decision to move. He remembered moving. He remembered the human current of the congregation, 112 people converting simultaneously from a seated audience, a mob operating on the most ancient available software, the software of survival, and how the current had its own physics, its own irresistible hydraulics, and how he was moving with it and against it at the same time, trying to go forward toward the front of the church when every other body was going back. He heard the shot, a single shot, from outside, through the broken western window. The sound of it in the enclosed space was enormous. Enormous in a way that is impossible to reproduce in description, that stays in the body after the event as a physical memory, a vibration below the threshold of hearing that the chest continues to feel for years afterward. He did not see his father fall. He heard it, the soft and terrible sound, not the dramatic crash of cinema, but the simple, unremarkable sound of a person ceasing to support their own weight, of a body reverting to the ground from which all bodies come. He was then underwater. The baptismal pool behind the pulpit was shallow, 3 feet of water in the concrete basin, used for full immersion baptisms, the last of which had been 2 months ago, a 17-year-old called Enoch, who had wept through the whole thing with a quality of weeping that Caleb had recognized as the real thing. He did not know how he got into the water. The crowd had pushed him there, or he had gone instinctively to the only enclosed space near the front of the church that the fire had not reached, or both. He went under. He pressed himself against the bottom of the basin. He held his breath with the absolute terrified focus of someone whose body has decided that breathing is a secondary concern. He heard the world end above him. It was not a long process. What happened in the church happened in 4 minutes. He counted later, not because he had a watch, but because he reconstructed the sequence from what he heard and what he found when he surfaced, and the reconstruction produced 4 minutes. 4 minutes for the thing that could not be undone. He surfaced into smoke and silence. The generators had given out. The bare bulbs were dark. The fire on the eastern wall had found something structural and was consuming it with the focused, methodical patience of something that has all the time in the world. Through the broken windows, through the hole where the door had been, the light outside was the wrong color, too orange, too alive. Caleb stood in water that was warm now, because the heat of the burning wall was radiant, and the pool was small. He stood and he looked, and his mind performed the inventory of the room, in the way that minds perform inventories when the inventory is necessary and unbearable simultaneously. His father lay across the altar steps, with his arms still spread. He lay with a quality of stillness that was entirely unlike sleep, entirely unlike unconsciousness, the stillness of a stopped thing. Caleb looked at him for a long time. He was aware, distantly, that looking at this was forming something inside him, not a memory, which is recoverable, but a foundation, which is not. Something was being laid down in the bedrock of who he was, and it would shape everything built above it for the rest of his life. He climbed out of the pool. He walked to his father. He sat down on the altar step beside him and took the old man's hand, the hand that had held his as a child, that had corrected his manuscript papers in red ink, that had rested on his shoulder at his ordination, the weight that was not just physical, and he held it. Outside, the motorcycles were idling. He became aware, very gradually, that the idling was not the idling of departure. It was the idling of waiting, of occupation. He looked up. Through the ruined western wall of the church, middle distance, something was wrong with the road. What was wrong with the road was the vehicles. Not the motorcycles. Those were everywhere, parked at angles on the red dirt, their riders standing with weapons, in the particular loose, proprietary posture of men who have taken a place and are now administering it. The vehicles Caleb was looking at were different. They were white Land Cruisers, 4 of them, unmarked except for a logo he could not read from this distance, and they were moving slowly up the road toward the church with the unhurried confidence of machinery at their rapid pace. Behind the Land Cruisers were 2 larger trucks. He recognized the shape of the equipment mounted on the flatbeds, ground-penetrating survey equipment. He had seen this equipment before, 3 years ago, when a mining consortium had surveyed the hills north of Gwoza, and then, after the surveys revealed nothing commercially viable, departed. The equipment had a distinctive profile: the antenna arrays, the recording units, the long metal rods of the ground sensors, survey equipment. He was looking at survey equipment arriving at his burning church within 20 minutes of the attack. He knelt in the ash of his father's church, and he watched the Land Cruisers stop, and he watched the men who got out of them, and he watched one man in particular, a man in a well-pressed agbada, a man whose face he knew from campaign posters and constituency appearances, a man whose photograph he had seen in the Borno state government newsletter that was distributed to churches and schools, step out of the laid vehicle and shake hands with the man in the red headscarf who had been directing operations on the road. The handshake was comfortable. It was the handshake of people who have shaken hands before, who have sat at tables together, who have interests in common. Honorable Beatrice daughter, member of the House of Representatives for Gwaza-Damboa Federal Constituency, laughed at something the man in the red headscarf said. His teeth were white, and his watch caught the light. He laughed. Caleb looked at his father's hand, still in his. He looked at the man in the akabada, laughing. Something happened inside him in that moment that did not make a sound and did not announce itself, but was, you would understand later, one of the 3 or 4 genuinely significant events of his life. Something that had been, until that moment, a structure composed of faith and grief and confusion, collapsed, not into despair, into clarity. This was not a religious war. This was a business. The religion was packaging. The business was the land, the minerals under the land, the lithium and the gold and the uranium that the survey trucks were here to map, now that the people who had lived on this land had been removed from it. The dead were not collateral damage. The dead were the point. You could not survey land that living people were farming. You could not file a mining concession on land whose owners were present to object. You had to empty the land first. And to empty the land, you needed something that would motivate mass displacement at scale, quickly, without requiring the state to acknowledge what it was doing. You needed a war. Caleb understood all of this in approximately 4 seconds, sitting in the ash of his father's church with his father's hand in his, watching a member of parliament laugh with a terrorist in a red headscarf while survey trucks lined up along the road. He set his father's hand down gently on the floor. He stood up. He walked to the ruins of the church door and stood in them and looked at the road and the vehicles and the men and the laughing politician. He was not trembling. This surprised him distantly. He had expected to tremble. His voice, when he finally spoke, quietly, to no one, to himself, to his dead father behind him, was the voice of a man who has just received information that permanently changes the map he was navigating by. "They have the guns," he said. "We have the ground. It is time we use it." Furtstout. The soldiers came at 4 in the afternoon. They came in a battered army pickup, 3 of them, plus a captain, wearing expressions of the particular professional sorrow of men who deliver the same bad news with such frequency that it has calcified into a performance of sorrow rather than the feeling itself. Captain Adamu Ibrahim was 42 and had been stationed in Borno for 3 years, which was 2 years longer than military wisdom recommended for psychological health and 1 year longer than his own personal threshold. He'd been to more attack sites in those 3 years than he had attended weddings or birthday parties or ordinary social functions. He had the well-worn compassion of a man who has had to care many times for many strangers and has developed an economy of caring that allows him to distribute it without running out. He walks through what remained of Gwaza Baptist Church, with Caleb at his side, taking photographs on a government-issue phone, writing in a notebook with a ballpoint pen that ran out halfway through and had to be shaken back to life. He used the word coordinated twice and the phrase unfortunate incident once, and after the second use of coordinated, he looked at Caleb and said, with the minimal honesty available to him within his operational constraints, "We will investigate." "I cannot tell you more than that. Can you tell me," Caleb said, "who gave the survey trucks access to this road within 20 minutes of the attack?" Captain Ibrahim's face went through something small and quickly suppressed. "I do not know about survey trucks," he said. "They were here," Caleb said. 4 land cruisers and 2 flatbeds with ground-penetrating survey equipment. Honorable Beatrice Dauda was in the lead vehicle. The captain looked at his notebook. He looked at Caleb. He looked at the notebook again. "I will include this in the report," he said finally. "Who will read the report?" A silence that was its own answer. Caleb thanked the captain for coming. He shook his hand. He watched the pickup drive away and stood in the settling dust and understood, with a certainty that was cold and complete, that the report would not be read by anyone who would act on it, and that the investigation would produce the investigation-shaped structure that these things always produced in Nigeria. a sequence of procedural movements that suggested forward motion while remaining, in geographic terms, entirely stationary. Kemi arrived at dusk in a borrowed Corolla she had driven 4 hours without stopping, which meant she had been on the road before the news reached her by any rational means, which meant that Borno State's informal information networks operated faster than any rational means. She was still in her nurse's uniform, the pale blue tunic with the hospital logo on the breast pocket, the white trainers that were no longer quite white. She had clearly been weeping in the car, and had clearly stopped before she got out, not from any desire to conceal the weeping, but because the car had been the appropriate space for it, and this space was not. She had the exhausted, specific clarity of someone who has processed the first wave of grief and is now operating in the stillness on the other side of it. She found Caleb sitting on the front step of the church, his father's Bible in his lap, open to Philippians chapter 4. The page was damp. She sat beside him without speaking. She put her hand over his hand on the Bible. The sun finished going down. The Mandara mountains, which were visible from the church on clear evenings, as a dark, jagged line against the sky, disappeared into the dark. The insects began their night work. "Come to the camp," she said. "After a long time. Pastor Emmanuel has beds. There are generators. I can—" "2 days ago," Caleb said, "the Honorable's motorcade came through town." Her hand stilled on his. 3 men in red headscarves were riding as part of the escort, the same red headscarves. "I know because I noticed them, and I thought it was strange, and I remembered their faces." He paused. Behind the motorcade were survey trucks, geological survey trucks. Kemi, she understood. He could feel the understanding move through her hand into his. "It has been happening all across Borno," he continued. "Plateau, Benue, Taraba. I have been reading the reports from the IDP camps. The pattern is always the same. Attack, displacement. Then within weeks, sometimes days, mining activity begins on the land the people were living on. Lithium, gold, tantalite, the minerals the whole world needs for its electric cars, and its clean energy, and its bright future." He looked at his hands. "We are the cost of someone else's clean energy, Kemi. Our dead are the down payment," she said, very carefully. "We go to Abuja. We find journalists. The international press. Leah Sharibu has been in captivity since 2018. His voice was flat, informational, the voice of a person reciting facts that have become unbearable through repetition. The press knows. The government knows. The international community knows. Her name was in every newspaper in the world for 6 months." He paused. "She is still there." Kemi had no answer for this. "The Chibok girls." "And girls are still there, Kemi." He looked at her finally. His eyes were dry in a way that was more alarming than weeping. "Waiting for someone else to solve the problem has not been working. Someone else has not come. We are going to have to become the someone else." She looked at him for a long time. The fire in the church was out now. The smell of ash and petrol lingered, and would linger, and would be there in everything that grew on this land for years. "I will not leave," Caleb said, "but I need you to go back to Maduguri. I need you to keep working at the hospital." He paused. "And I need you to find a man named Obinna Okafor. He drinks near the old army billets, behind the university gate. Ask anyone. They will know." "Who is he?" "A man the army threw away," Caleb said. "A man who knows things I need to know. A man who is angry enough and skilled enough to make that knowledge useful." She looked at the Bible in his lap, at the page open to Philippians 4. "Will you be safe?" she asked, because she had to ask it, even knowing the answer was not the kind of thing that could be given. He covered her hand with his. "I will send word. Go." She stood up. She was going to say several things. She was aware of several things cooing for expression, and she said none of them. She bent down and kissed his forehead, the way you kiss someone when what you want to express is too large for words and physical contact is the only available container. Then she walked to the car. He listened to her engine until it was inaudible. Then he opened his father's Bible, and in the last light of the day found a pen in his breast pocket, and he wrote in the margin of Philippians 4, in the small, precise handwriting he had inherited from his schoolteacher father, "They took our peace. We will take it back." He closed the Bible. He went inside to count his dead. Chapter 2. The Soldier in the Bottle, Madaguri, Borno State. 2 weeks later, the bar had been named New Life by an optimist who was no longer present to defend the choice. It occupied the ground floor of the 3-story building on Shihu Laminu Way, a building whose upper floors had been gutted by a gas explosion 4 years ago and had been in the process of being rebuilt ever since, slowly and without obvious momentum, so that the scaffolding on the upper levels had become a permanent feature, rusting comfortably into the architecture like something that had grown there. The bar itself was intact, low ceiling, erratic fan, the persistent smell of beer and cigarette smoke, and underneath both, if you knew what you were smelling for, the sourness of sustained grief. A television in the corner showed a football match that no one was watching with the muted, democratic indifference of a television that has accepted its irrelevance to the actual life of the room. The clientele, on any given evening, consisted of 3 distinct communities, occupying the same space, without meaningfully intersecting. University lecturers from the institution to streets over, whose salaries had been unpaid for 4 months, and who were converting the resulting despair into a parasta form of expensive liquid philosophy, demobilized soldiers who had served their time in the Northeast and had been reabsorbed by a civilian life that had no particular category for what they would become, and the specific, recognizable type of man who had once been somebody consequential and could not stop performing the former self for whatever audience remained. Kemi found Sergeant Obina Okafor at the corner table. She had expected. She did not know precisely what she had expected. The cinema version, perhaps. Shaking hands, hollow face, the visible wreckage of a man coming apart. What she found was something that confounded the expectation in the specific way that reality confounds expectations, shaped by insufficient information. He was 35. He was not coming apart. He was, in fact, physically formidable in a way that the corner table and the half-empty bottle and the studied casualness of his posture could not entirely conceal, the kind of formidable that is built over years of systematic training and does not leave even when the training stops, that lives in the shoulders and the stillness, and the way the eyes move over everything that enters a room, before arriving at a decision about whether it is worth attending to. His eyes moved over Kemi. The assessment took perhaps 2 seconds, and was neither rude nor warm. It was the eyes of someone who has learned that the 2 seconds are necessary, and cannot be spent on manners. He had a glass of puragai in front of him. The glass was full. He had not touched it. "You are the nurse," he said, before she could speak. She sat down across from him without being invited. "He said you would know I was coming. His messenger came 3 days ago." Obina looked at his glass. The glass looked back at him with the patient, non-judgmental quality of substances that require no reciprocation. "I told a messenger to tell the pastor that I am retired." "You do not look retired. You look like a man keeping an appointment with a bottle he has decided not to drink." The corner of his mouth shifted. It was not a smile. It was what happened to his face when something struck him as accurate. "Smart woman. Doctors ask, what brings you in? What is his actual plan? March into the Sambisa with a cross and a prayer." "He wants to build a defense," she said. "Not a suicide mission, a structured, terrain-based defense of the Gwoza corridor. He says you know how to turn local knowledge into tactical advantage." "I do." Obina picked up the glass, set it down. "I also know that the Nigerian army, with actual weapons, actual helicopters, actual budgets, actual men who have been through 6 months of training, has been attempting to do precisely that for 15 years. and is losing ground every quarter. So the arithmetic of a local pastor with farm tools and grievances is not encouraging. He is not asking you to win the national war, Kimmy said. He is asking you to make the cost of attacking one region high enough that the cartel moves on to easier targets. Asymmetric, local. He understands the terrain. You understand the tactics. Between the two of you, between the two of us, there is the matter of weapons, training time, supply chains, and the fact that ISWAP has drone reconnaissance of the mountain region. Opana's voice was not hostile. It was the voice of a man who has done this specific calculation many times and finds the result consistently dispiriting. What does he have? Honestly, she told him. Honestly. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a full minute. The football match murmured in the corner. 3 tables over, a man laughed at something, the laugh of someone performing wellness. 17 men, Obina said finally. 11 Dane guns, 8 machetes, 3 pistols of uncertain reliability, and a stolen radio. He paused, and an intimate knowledge of every mountain pass between Gwoza and the Cameroon border. Yes, that last part, he said, is worth more than the rest combined. In asymmetric warfare, terrain knowledge is the great equalizer. You cannot buy your way into knowing a landscape the way the people who were born in it know it. The Istipi fighters who come into the Mandara Mountains are outsiders. They know what their scouts tell them, and what the Google Earth imagery shows them. And neither of these things is the ground truth that a man who played in those ravines as a child carries in his body. He was quiet again. I had 22 men, he said, and his voice shifted register. The same voice, but pitched differently, the way a musical instrument sounds different when the player commits to what they are playing. Platoon, best soldiers I served with. We went into an ambush on the Konduga Road, both ends of the road sealed, high ground covered, IEDs at intervals. Professional, the kind of setup that requires precise inside information about patrol routes and timing. He picked up the glass. He turned it in his hand. The inside information came from a man in our unit, repentant ESWAP fighter processed through the government's rehabilitation program, passed his assessment, got assigned to our platoon, spent 6 weeks eating beside my men, learning their names, their habits, which way they faced when they slept. He was sitting next to Corporal Emeka Obi when the first IED detonated. Kemi said nothing. There was nothing to say. I was the last man in. I would gone back to the 3rd vehicle for my radio. I would left it on the seat, which was a stupid thing to do, and I have thought about this every day since. What would have happened if I had not left the radio? He set the glass down without drinking from it. By the time I turned around, there was nothing left to go back to. 22 men. Not a single one. The court-martial. The army court-martialed me for conduct unbecoming an officer. He said the phrase with a precision that indicated he had repeated it many times, that it had become worn smooth with repetition like a stone in a river. The specifics were complicated. They said I had communicated tactical information in an unsecure channel. The reality was simpler. I had written a detailed report naming the commanding general who approved the troop composition, against my explicit objection, and the court-martial was the Army's way of managing that report. He looked at her. So, not retired, temporarily warehoused, with a drinking habit I have maintained but not indulged, which takes more discipline than you might think. Will you come? She asked. He looked at the table. He looked at her. He looked at the untouched glass with the expression of a man making a definitive decision about something that has required too many provisional ones. One condition, he said. I meet your pastor face to face before I commit to anything. I have served under men whose courage was an abstraction and whose orders were paid for in other men's lives. I need to look him in the eye. He will understand that. And one more thing. He leaned forward slightly. This will not be clean. People will die. Our people, not just theirs. Good intentions are dangerous in combat because they make you hesitate, and hesitation kills. If he wakes up one morning and decides his hands need to stay spotless, men will die for nothing, and I will not be party to that again. His eyes were steady on hers. I need to know that he understands this, not as a pastor understands it, not as a theological proposition, as a man. She thought of Caleb's face in the church, sitting with his father's hand, the flatness of it, the specific absence of the particular light she had always known behind his eyes, the warm, slightly unfocused quality of someone whose experience of the world was mediated by hope. That quality was gone. What was there instead was something harder and less comfortable, but it was not nothing. It was directed. He understands, she said. More than you know, Sergeant. Abena stood up. He picked up the glass of paraga and poured it carefully on the ground beside his chair, not dramatically, not as a gesture, but as a simple and final disposal. Tell your pastor I will come on Wednesday, he said, early. He walked out without looking back. Kemi sat alone at the corner table and looked at the small dark stain on the floor where the paraga had soaked in, and thought that she had just set something in motion that could not be stopped, and felt both the weight and the necessity of this in equal measure. The uncompleted building, Eastern Gwoza, Wednesday morning. The building had 3 walls, a partial fourth, and a roof of corrugated iron, whose bolts had gradually surrendered to the harmattan, so that the right-hand corner lifted slightly in strong wind and produced a sound like a carred bicycle spokes. The floor was compacted earth. The western wall had never been finished. The original builder had run out of money or motivation or both, which was a not uncommon architectural condition in this part of Nigeria, where optimism and resources frequently parted company before a structure was complete. There were 3 windows, each without glass, cut into the walls at intervals that suggested the builder had thought about ventilation. The building was unremarkable in every respect. It said, "Nothing important happens here." It said, "Move along." This was Caleb's intention. Obina arrived first. This was his nature. He spent 10 minutes walking the perimeter of the building before entering it, not because he was performing vigilance, but because vigilance had become a physical habit, the way a musician's fingers move to familiar positions without conscious instruction. He noted 2 exits, 1 entry. The cashew tree adjacent to the eastern wall could be accessed from inside via the windowsill and would provide an elevated position from which the road in both directions was visible. The unpaved path behind the building ran south for 40 meters before curving into a market area where a man in a hurry could disappear within 60 seconds. He filed all of this as a man files what he needs, and sat down with his back to the most solid wall and waited. Caleb arrived 7 minutes later with 3 young men. Obina assessed in one practiced look. One was a trained hunter. You could see it in how he moved, the unhurried attention to the ground before each step. The other 2 were farmers with recent military ambitions, earnest and watchable and yet reliable in ways that only time and pressure would resolve. The hunter carried a local Dane gun, with the care of a craftsman handling his principal tool. Caleb and Obina looked at each other. The look took longer than an exchange of strangers usually takes, because both men were used to looking at people with the specific attention of someone for whom accurate assessment carries high stakes, and because the mutual recognition of this quality in the other person required a moment of acknowledgement. What Caleb saw, a soldier who moved like water, without announcement, without wasted motion, with the specific precision someone who has spent years refining themselves down to essentials. The bitterness he had expected was there, but it was not the bitterness of a man who has given up. It was the bitterness of someone with a great deal of unresolved energy, looking for somewhere to put it. What Obina saw, a man who had been recently and fundamentally altered. Not by grief alone. Grief produces a different kind of alteration, more collapse, more softness. This was the alteration produced by the confrontation for profound belief with an incompatible reality. The scaffolding of the belief was still visible, but the interior had been stripped and was being refurnished with something different, something harder. They shook hands. Show me what you have, Obina said. He sat cross-legged in the dirt with the naturalness of a man for whom floors are adequate. Caleb sat opposite him and picked up a stick. He began to draw. The drawing took 40 minutes. By the end of it, the dirt floor between them was covered in a detailed topographic schematic of the Gwoza-Bama axis, the road, the passes, the ravines, the ridgelines, the seasonal drainage channels that became impassable in rain, the positions of the nearest settlements, the routes the mine convoys used, and the specific choke points where a narrow road pressed against a steep hillside, and a vehicle convoy had exactly nowhere to go. Obana said nothing throughout. He crouched over the map with his forearms on his thighs, and his eyes moving over it with the clinical attention of a diagnostician looking at an X-ray, noting what it showed and what it implied. When Caleb stopped drawing, Obina was quiet for a long time. "You have been doing reconnaissance," he said, "not just remembering. Active reconnaissance, every week since the attack. I go out at night. I map, alone, with James." He indicated the young Mumuwe hunter. "He is the best tracker I have seen. He can read a disturbed surface the way you read a page." Obina looked at James Tanko with the reassessment of someone updating their initial categorization. "You can track individuals cross dry ground." James considered the question with the seriousness of a craftsman asked about their work. "Dry ground is harder, but yes. You look for weight transfer in the dust, the direction of displaced particles. A man walking in a hurry leans forward. The toe mark is deeper than the heel. A man carrying something heavy drops the outside of his foot. With practice. Enough," Obina said, not dismissively, but with the precision of a man who has received sufficient information and does not require more. He looked at Caleb. "What is your timeline?" "The next convoy moves in 11 days. Obina looked at the map. He looked at the ravine Caleb had marked with a series of small stones. He picked up the stick Caleb had set down and tapped the apex of the curve. The place where the road narrowed to a width would hold exactly 2 vehicles abreast, with a cliff face on the right and a 40-foot drop into a dry riverbed on the left. "Tell me about the baobab," he said. Caleb looked up. "How do you know about the tree?" "Because if I were designing an ambush position at this location," he tapped the spot. "The baobab on the southern ridge is the natural blocking point. Its root system is exposed from erosion. A tree with exposed roots at the edge of a ravine is a tree that wants to fall." Looked at Caleb. "You have thought about it." "Yes, talk me through it." Caleb took the stick back. "We do not fight them in the open. We do not fight them at all, in the conventional sense. We remove their mobility and force them into terrain where their mounted weapons are useless. Then we engage at close range, where a Dani gun and a machete and the advantage of prepared positions makes the exchange winnable." He paused. Decoy truck at the bend. Convoy stops to assess. In the pause, we drop the baobab across the road behind the rear vehicle. They are sealed. The DA gunner in the forward hillocks cannot elevate his barrel high enough to engage positions on the ridge above him. We hit from above with the arrows. "The arrows with the chemical payload," Obina said. "Your sister mentioned that in the message. The Smiths are working on a design. Hollow tip, clay vessel. The mixture ignites on contact with oxygen. When the clay breaks, it is not military grade. It will not penetrate armor. But it produces enough smoke and fire in an open vehicle cab that the crew exits. And an ISWAP fighter outside his vehicle, without the mounted gun, in terrain he does not know. It's a man with a rifle against men with higher ground." Obina finished. He was quiet for a moment. "It is a good plan. It is not a complete plan." He began to add elements to the map. "You have thought about the trap, but not about the 10 minutes after the trap. When the convoy goes radio silent, their base will send a response team. We have a window of approximately 25 minutes before the window closes. We strip the convoy and leave in under 20. Can your men move at that pace with cargo? We will train for it." Obina looked at him. We have 11 days. That is not enough time. 11 days is what we have. Then we begin tonight. Caleb looked at the map between them. He looked at the shape of the gorge, the position of the tree, the road that curved through what was. He had played here as a child, one of the most beautiful places he knew. He thought about what it meant that this beautiful place was now the location for something that would produce death. He allowed himself to think about this for exactly the time it took to think it, and then he set the thought aside. "One thing I need from you first," Opena said. His voice had changed, lowered. "The same thing I asked through the nurse. What happens inside you when it is real? When the man is in front of you and pulling the trigger is the only way." Caleb was looking at the map. He was thinking about his father, spread across the altar steps with his arms out. He was thinking about Zainab's pink hijab, delivered like a receipt. He was thinking about Honorable Bikrasbota, laughing, with his good teeth and his expensive watch, while the survey trucks lined up. "Nothing," he said. Obina held his gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded, not approval exactly, but the nod of a man who has received an answer that closes one question, while opening several others that there is not time to address now. "Tonight, and then," he said, "bring your men, bring water, bring the tracker." He stood up, dusted his knees with 2 efficient brushes of his palms, and walked to the window to check the road. Training had begun. Chapter 3. The Forge. Mandara Mountains. The following months. He said it at 4:47 a.m. Sem, which was not the beginning of the day by any conventional understanding, but which was, he had decided, the correct time to begin what they were building. The pre-dawn quality of the air in the mountain camp had a specific character, cool, with an edge that the harmattan gave it in this season, carrying the smell of the forest, the dry wood smell of harmattan, the distant mineral smell of the ridge above them, and something else, something that was simply altitude, that anyone who has lived in mountains knows and cannot describe to anyone who has not. 22 people stood in front of him. They would be more in time. For now, 22, an unlikely collection. 6 of them had some form of prior military experience, which was useful. 4 of them were experienced hunters, which was more useful than it sounded, and possibly more useful than the military experience. The remaining 12 were farmers, teachers, a shopkeeper, mechanic, and a boy of 19, named Musa, who had arrived with a Dane gun, larger than he was comfortable holding, and an expression of determination, so concentrated, it was almost physical. "Panic," Obina continued, using the flat, informational tone he had developed over a decade of military instruction. The tone that communicated that what was being said was the truth, and not a performance of the truth. Panic is the body's response to a situation it has never encountered before. When a situation is entirely new, the body has no stored procedure for it. It reverts to the oldest available response, which is the same response your ancestors had when a predator appeared unexpectedly. A massive dump of adrenaline and cortisol, a narrowing of attention to the immediate threat, and an extremely powerful impulse to either flee or attack without strategy. In a firefight, both of those responses will get you killed. Procedure is the alternative. Procedure is the sequence of actions you rehearse until your body can execute them, without your conscious mind being involved, until the situation, however new and terrifying, finds a match in your stored repertoire, and your hands begin to move before your brain has finished processing what is happening. You will be afraid. Every person standing in front of me right now will be afraid when it becomes real, and if they tell you otherwise, they are either lying, or they have been doing this so long that the fear has become indistinguishable from baseline. Fear is not the problem. The problem is fear without a procedure. He stopped. He looked at them. "We begin now," he said. "Tonight you learn to fall correctly. Tomorrow you learn to be still." Learning to fall correctly took 3 evenings. The principle was simple. In rough terrain, a man who cannot fall silently, who instinctively reaches out with his hands and creates a sound when his palms hit the ground, or who lets a grunt escape on impact, is a man who reveals his position at the worst possible moment. Falling correctly meant rolling, distributing the impact across the shoulder and the hip, the way a trained martial artist falls, except without a mat, and in the dark, and on uneven ground that might have rocks in it. There was no elegant way to learn this. You learn by falling badly, repeatedly, until the body absorbed the lesson through its own protest. Musa, the 19-year-old, fell badly 17 times on the first evening before his body found the motion. He fell in every incorrect way available to a human body, palm first, face first, sideways with his knee or step suffer, once in a spectacular full backward roll that would have been impressive as a performance and was disastrous as a tactical movement. After the 17th fall, he lay in the dirt for a moment, looking at the stars, which in the mountain air were extraordinary, dense and close, the Milky Way a visible river of light overhead. Then he got up and asked Obina to show him again. Obina showed him. Musa fell correctly on the 18th attempt. Not perfectly, but correctly enough that the sound it made was manageable, survivable, the kind of sound that the night forest absorbed and did not amplify. Obina said nothing. He moved on to the next man. Caleb, watching from the side, saw what this was. Not just physical training, but the creation of a shared experience of struggle that would become, in time, the foundation of a unit. Men who have been through discomfort together, who have seen each other fall and rise without judgment, develop a particular texture of trust that is unavailable by any other route. He understood this in the way that a pastor understands it, from a different angle. The trust built in a congregation that has grieved together is different from and deeper than the trust built in ordinary social exchange. Obina was building a congregation of the necessary kind. Dachong Rawang arrived from Plateau State on a Saturday morning in the cab of a supply truck that had made the 11-hour journey from Jos, with agricultural supplies that were agricultural supplies and also, in 2 cases, crates whose manifests described them as fertilizer and which contained something rather different from fertilizer. He was a man of 40 whose compact, powerful build was the product for generations of smithing, the shoulders widened by hammerwork, the forearms developed by the sustained grip of tools that resist, the hands a document of his career, mapped with old burns that had healed into silver and brown topography, calloused at the palm, in the specific pattern of a man who works hot metal daily. His face was wide, dark, and wore a habitual expression of assessment, the face of someone who looks at objects and sees their potential rather than their current form. He looked at the camp the same way. He walked the perimeter, then the interior, noting the available materials, the access to water, the natural ventilation of the cave system on the ridge above. He was quiet throughout this inspection, a quietness not of discomfort but of concentration. Then he found Caleb and Obina and said without preamble, "Show me what you need." Obina showed him. Dachong nodded throughout the presentation, not the performative nodding of someone demonstrating attention, but the rapid, absorbing nods of a man who is building something in his head as fast as information is being provided. "The caltrops," he said, when Obina had finished. "I can do better than the standard 4-point design. If I flatten 2 of the points and angle them at 15 degrees from the primary axis, they bite into a tire tread more aggressively and are harder to see on a dust road at night. We can make 500 in 3 days, with the right scrap metal. What do you need? Vehicle axles. Old ones. The steel is already tempered. If your network can get me 2 or 3 from the market in Gwoza, I can cut them into segments and work from there. Also hardwood charcoal, not the soft variety. I am burning at temperatures the soft charcoal will not maintain. The arrow tips," Caleb said, "the chemical payload design. I have been thinking about this on the road." Akung crouched and picked up a stone, Not to throw, but to hold. The way smiths sometimes hold things while they think. The tactile grounding of a thought. The problem with a breakable clay vessel is consistency. The vessel breaks too early. You have released the payload before the arrow reaches its target. Too late. It does not break at all. What you need is a thin-walled vessel that breaks on impact with a hard surface, but not from the vibration of flight. He paused. I have seen hunters in the Jos Plateau use this principle with poison. It is not new. The delivery mechanism is a compressed clay disc, not a sphere. Disc shape distributes the compression of the arrow's flight differently. It is counterintuitive. It works. Obina was watching him with the expression of someone who has unexpectedly found something useful where they did not look for it. Can you demonstrate before we commit to 500 units? I can demonstrate by Friday. Good. Obina looked at Caleb. Gave him what he needs. Dakong looked around the camp again with his assessment expression. I will need a forge space. The cave on the northern ridge. I can see from here that the rock formation at the back has a natural chimney. It is not ideal, but it will do. And I need 2 apprentices. Young ones, strong hands, not afraid of heat. Caleb looked at Musa, who had been listening from several feet away, with the alert, slightly forward posture of heaven for a 19-year-old wants to be considered. Musa, Caleb said. Musa straightened. Yes, sir. You are going to help Master Dakshong. Musa looked at Dakshong. Dakshong looked at Musa with a frank, unhurried assessment of a craftsman evaluating a potential apprentice. Strong hands? Dakshong asked. Musa hayed them out. They were farmers' hands, wide-palmed, rough, with the kind of strength in them that comes from working soil rather than lifting weights, which was a different and in some ways more durable kind. Dakong nodded. We start tomorrow morning. Come before sunrise. Musa looked as though he had been given a prize he had not expected, and was not sure he deserved. Yes, sir. Dengoshid arrived from Plateau State 12 days later, having driven a vehicle he described as technically operational for 13 hours on roads that ranged from poor to theoretical. He was 40, Tarak, with the lean, watchful quality of a man who had spent 20 years in the Nigerian police service, believing in what it was supposed to be, and the last 3 years of that time confronting what it actually was. He carried with him a battered pistol with 3 full magazines, a cardboard box of photocopied documents, and the expression of someone who has been sitting alone with important information for too long and has finally found, with some relief, a place to put it. He laid the documents out on the flat rock that served as the camp's planning table, a boulder, smoothed by centuries of rain, that sat in the shade of the ridge overhang at a height convenient for standing over. Land registrations, he said. Community title, documents, mining concessions. I pulled these from the Plateau State Government Land Registry, from the Federal Ministry of Mines, and from a source in the Corporate Affairs Commission in Abuja, who owed me a favor and has since relocated to his mother's village and chosen not to answer calls. He spread the papers in chronological order. Look at the dates. Caleb, Obina, and a young man named Samuldung, who had formerly worked as a clerk at the Plateau State Local Government Office and could read official documents with the practiced efficiency of someone who had processed thousands of them. All 3 of them leaned over the rock. Samuel's finger moved along the columns. Community land titles. These villages. Cancelled. Reason for cancellation. Reclassification as Federal Mineral Resource Zone. His voice was flat with the effort of staying flat. Reclassification dates. He looked up. The reclassification filings are dated between 45 and 90 days after the attacks in each community. Every single one, Den said. Obina straightened up slowly. He looked at Caleb. Mining concessions, Samuel continued, his finger moving to the next column. Granted within 6 months of the reclassification. In each case, 2 entities whose registered addresses are, he read from the documents, Dubai, Singapore, 2 in Cyprus, 1 in, he squinted. This one says business services address in Wilmington, Delaware, USA. He looked up again. Someone in Delaware, Obina said, is making money from what happened to your village. Someone in Delaware, Caleb said, has never heard of Guoza, has never heard of any of these places. Has a company registered at a mail forwarding address in Wilmington, because Delaware has the most favorable corporate registration laws in the United States, and has shareholders who know where the metal comes from and have decided that they do not need to. He was looking at a date on one of the documents, the date of the land reclassification of the hill directly behind Guoza Baptist Church, 63 days after the attack. 63 days after his father was shot at the altar. This is the evidence, Nen said. Not everything. There are gaps, and a lawyer would find the gaps and use them. But this is enough to establish the pattern. It is enough to show that the attacks and the land reclassifications and the mining concessions are not coincidences. Who else has seen this? Caleb asked. I have a copy. You have a copy. And there is a man in Zamfara, a smuggler named Gambo Tunko, who reportedly has a much more complete record. Names, amounts, transaction codes, phone numbers, the full ledger. Den paused. He has been trying to find a way to use it safely for 8 months. His problem is that the people named in it include the people who would investigate it. We need that ledger, Obina said. We need to find Gambo Tanko, Caleb said. I have a partial address, Inan said. Last known location, somewhere in the displacement camps outside Demeturu. Caleb looked at the documents on the rock. He looked at the date. 63 days. We will find him, he said. Chapter 4. Rivers and Blood Brothers. Benue State. The same season. Turka. Opper knew the rain 3 days before it came. This was not mysticism. It was the accumulated knowledge of a man who had been farming the same patch of Benue earth for 22 years, had watched the sky over the river, had felt the particular quality of the air when the seasonal patterns were shifting, had learned to read the behavior of the birds and the insects, and the way the yam leaves moved in the pre-rain wind. His father had known it at 2 days. His grandfather, who had farmed the same land before him, at 4. The knowledge was being refined across generations, and Taka had not yet reached his grandfather's sensitivity, but he was getting closer. He was standing in his northern field on a Tuesday evening, reading the sky, when the men came. He heard them before he saw them, which was how it always went, the noise of motorcycles, which was a sound that had acquired, in the past 3 years, a secondary meaning that sat on top of its original one, the way sediment sits on river rock. His hand went to the small radio in his pocket, the early warning network that the Regioni Church Council had established, through which communities between the Benue River and the Taraba border shared information at the speed of shortwave transmission, which was faster than motorcycles. He was already broadcasting when he heard the first shot. The shot was not close. It was in the direction of the compound where his brother Igba was checking the irrigation sluice. The distance and direction of the shot produced a sound in Turkala's chest that was not quite sound, a resonance, below hearing, that the body generates in response to catastrophic information. Before the mind has processed it, he ran. He ran the 400 meters between the northern field and the irrigation sluice in the dark, in the way that men run when they are running toward what they are afraid of, which is a different running from all other running, faster in some ways, slower in others, driven by something below will. He found Igba beside the sluice. He sat down beside his brother in the wet earth and held him, and did not allow himself to make a sound, because the motorcycles were still audible, and he was alone, and making sounds in that situation was a luxury available only to people who had nothing left to protect. He held Igba, and he did not make sounds, and after a time the motorcycles went away. This was the 3rd member of his family he had buried in 2 years. He had decided, at the 2nd burial, that he would look at their faces, all of them, every one, before the earth covered them, because looking away was a form of abandonment, and he would not be guilty of it. He looked at Igba's face. Then he went home, and he told his wife, and Nohide, who was a woman of extraordinary steadiness, the kind of steadiness that is not the absence of feeling, but the mastery of it. And she received the information standing at the stove, and she did not stop what she was doing at the stove, because they had children who would need to eat, and the children's need to eat did not stop because their uncle was dead. After the children were in bed, she came and sat beside Turka at the table, and she said, "What are you going to do?" "I am going north," he said. She looked at him for a long time. She did not say, "Do not go." She did not say, "I need you here." These things were true, but she was a woman who had grown up in a country where men went and did not come back, and she understood the arithmetic of it. A man who stayed might keep his family safe for another season, and he might not, and eventually the season would come when staying was no longer sufficient. A man who went might never come back, or he might come back having changed something. She had done the arithmetic before he sat down at the table. "Come back," she said. She said it plainly, without decoration. "Come back." "I will try," he said, because he was honest. She nodded. She got up and began to pack his food for the road. At the bridge on the Taraba border, the rain, when it came all at once. This was the Benue Taraba rain, not the polite, incremental rain of more temperate climates, but the committed, total rain of the wet season in the Nigerian Middle Belt, which arrived with the authority of something that has been building for weeks and has decided that the time for building is over. Within 60 seconds of the first drop, our world had reorganized itself into the rain, and everything the rain was doing to it, and every other concern had been temporarily overwritten. The bridge was a concrete footbridge over a tributary of the Benue, functional, unmaintained, with steel handrails that had rusted into a uniform warm brown. Beneath it, a space of approximately 12 feet by 8 feet of dry ground, sufficient for 2 men to shelter without touching, which was the minimum workable configuration given what they were to each other. Terka had reached the bridge by mid-afternoon. The Jukun man was already there. He was about 30, wiry, with the particular leanness of someone who works on water, whose body has been refined by the specific demands of river work into something useful and economical. He sat on the ground with his back against the bridge stanchion, and his eyes on the rain falling into the river, with the patient, particular attention of a man who has spent significant portions of his life watching water. Tarka sat at the other end of the dry space. The history between Tiv and Jukun in this region was long, complex, and had produced enough violence over the past century to fill several academic volumes, and one ongoing, low-grade grief that both communities carried without acknowledging directly. Both men knew this history. Both men sat inside it in silence, listening to the rain. After 10 minutes, the Jukun man said, without looking away from the river, "You are going north, to find the man they call the shepherd." Turka looked at him. "The way you carry yourself," the man said. "A man going home looks one way. A man going to a fight looks another. You are going to a fight. So am I." Turka considered this. "What is your name?" "Agbu Yusuf. My father was a boatman on the Benue. I can navigate every tributary between here and Adamawa." He paused. "You are Tiv." "Taka Iba." The rain fell. The river moved. "I heard that the man in the north takes everyone," Agbu said. "Tiv, Jukun, Hausa, Berom, anyone who comes. He does not care about the old things. We care about the old things," Turka said. It was not a refusal. It was an acknowledgement of a fact. "Yes," Agbu finally looked at him. "We do. And the people who are burning our villages are grateful for that. As long as we are arguing about old things, they can burn new ones, and we will not have the numbers to stop them." He paused. "My sister was in Dapchi when the school was taken. 2018. She was released after 3 weeks. She converted. They released her. She came home different. She is still different." She will always be different. He looked back at the rain. I am done letting the old things decide who I stand beside. Turka was quiet for a while. My brother was killed 3 days ago, he said. The third family member in 2 years. The men who killed him, I tracked them to a compound 40 kilometers north of my farm. I have the location. He paused. I came north to find someone who can use that information. Agbu nodded slowly. A river and a tracker, he said. The shepherd might have use for both. The rain began to ease. The afternoon light changed to the gold of late sun, breaking through wet air, the particular saturated light that comes after rain in this part of the world, when the red soil is dark, and the leaves are brilliant, and the air smells of renewal, and the world looks, briefly, like it can be started. Agbu stood up and extended his hand. The gesture was simple. A Jukan man extending his hand to Otiv man at a bridge in the rain. The long, complicated history of those 2 words together, it was not a nothing gesture. Turka stood up and took the hand. How far north? Agbu asked. Borno, Turka said. The Mandara Mountains. Agbu shouldered his pack. I know a road, he said. Not the main road, a river road, faster and less watched. Lead, Turka said. They walked out from under the bridge into the gold aftermath of rain, and the road north began. Chapter 5. The Desert and the Ledger. Damaturu, Yobe State. The same period. The name on Kulu Abubakar's wrist was Hajia. She had put it there herself 8 months ago, using a needle and a mixture of soot and palm oil in the kitchen of a woman she had sheltered with for 3 weeks after the second attack. She had done it at 2 a.m, alone, while the compound was quiet, working by the light of her phone screen. It had hurt in the ordinary way that things hurt. The needle prick, the sting of the pigment, the skin's protest at being marked, and she had welcomed the ordinariness of it, because since the attack, pain had been so large and so constant that this small, voluntary pain felt almost restful by comparison. Hajia, 14 months old, small face, the habit of gripping Kulu's finger in her sleep with a grip that seemed, for something so small, unreasonably strong. On. Kulu was 23 and she lived in the displacement camp outside Damaturu, with the specific intensity of someone who has decided that living is a form of resistance. She was not dramatic about this. She did not announce it. She simply lived, woke early, fetched water, arbitrated the small disputes that displacement camp life generates in quantity, who gets which space, whose turn at the standpipe, the slow management of a community's frustration with itself, kept the informal register of who was present and who had on Heber, wrote letters for the illiterate, administered what small medical resources existed to those who needed them most. She had been doing all of this for 11 months. She did it without being asked and without being thanked, though people thanked her anyway, and she received the thanks with a courtesy that was genuine but brief, because there was always something else that needed doing. She noticed Gambo Tanko 3 days after he arrived, because noticing was her primary professional tool. He was wrong for the camp in several ways that were individually subtle and cumulatively obvious. His clothes, dirty, crumpled, but the fabric quality of a man accustomed to spending money on himself. His shoes, expensive leather, inappropriate for the red dirt, already destroyed by it. The way he sat, always with his back to a wall, always with a clear sight line to the nearest exit. The specific quality of his anxiety, which was not the anxious grief of displacement, but something else, the anxiety of a man being hunted. She brought him tea on the 3rd evening. He looked at the tea, then at her, with the expression of someone calibrating whether this was the kind of offer that came with strings or conditions, or consequences. Tea, she said. Not a conversation. Drink it. He drank it. She came back the following evening. This time he spoke first. You have been watching me, he said. I watch everyone. It is how I know who needs what. She sat down across from him, her back also to the wall. Because she had learned this habit too, for different reasons. You need something I have not worked out yet. Safety, he said, with the bleak humor of a man who has given up hoping the word means what it used to. That is usually the first thing. Who is looking for you? He looked at her steadily. If I told you that, you would run. I have nowhere left to run to, she said. This is as far as I go. So tell me, he told her. It took most of the night. Gambo Tanko was a Hausa man from Zamfara who had spent 11 years moving gold out of the region through a network of traders and brokers and shell companies that connected the artisanal mines of the Northwest to international commodity markets through a chain of transactions sophisticated enough to make each individual link look legitimate. He was not, he told her, the worst person in this network. He was not the most senior. He was not the most cruel. He was the person who knew the most, which was, he had come to understand, the most dangerous thing to be, the ledger. He had kept it initially as insurance, in the way that people in dangerous businesses keep records, not because they intend to use them, but because possession of them creates a mutual vulnerability that functions as a kind of rough parity. As long as the ledger existed, and was in his hands, the people named in it had reason to keep him alive. The problem was that the ledger had become too complete. I kept adding to it, he said. 11 years of adding. In the end, it had everything. Names of government ministers, military officers, international brokers, the corporate structures of the shell companies, amounts, dates, routing codes for the wire transfers, the full diagram of how the blood of the North becomes a tradable commodity on international markets. He produced the folder from inside his shirt. It was sweat-stained, dog-eared. The paper softened from being carried against a warm body for weeks. He opened it on the ground between them. Kulu looked at the 11 pages of dense handwritten notes. Numbers, names, dates, codes, the illegible handwriting of a man who had learned to write quickly, and without expectation of a reader other than himself. The people named in here, she said, include the people who would investigate it. Yes, which means to use it. I need to get it to someone outside the system. Someone who has their own form of power. He paused. Someone who is already fighting these people in a way that the system cannot stop. She looked at the name on her wrist. She looked at the ledger. There is a man in Borno, she said. They call him the Shepherd. His men are fighting back, not running, not hiding, fighting. She paused. They say he is winning. Winning how? With what? With mountains and knowledge and whatever they can make with their hands. She paused, and with a kind of anger that has direction, Gambo looked at his folder. He thought about the arithmetic, 8 months in the camps, 4 close calls, the sense of a circle tightening. He thought about the faces of the men named in the ledger, the politicians, the generals, the foreign executives, and the comfortable distance those faces maintained from the consequences of what they enabled. When do we leave? He said. Not yet, Kulu said. I have to arrange transport, and I have to make 3 copies of this. She tapped the folder. Before we go anywhere, this information has to exist in at least 3 separate places, so that the destruction of any one of them does not destroy the whole. He looked at her with something that was, for the first time since his arrival at the camp, not entirely anxiety, something that might, in a more settled life, have been respect. You have thought about this, he said. I think about everything, she said. It is a survival mechanism. She stood up. Sleep. We leave Friday. She walked back toward the camp's residential section. With her hands in her pockets, and the name on her wrist, and all 11 pages of the ledger in her head, because she had read it twice, and she had the kind of memory that, once she had decided something was important, kept it. She thought, Hadia, she thought, this is for you. This is what your 14 months mean. They mean this. Chapter 6. The American, Metuduri, month 3 of training. Captain Elias Vance had not been recruited into the United States Army Special Forces, because he was the most powerful person in any room he entered. He had been recruited 17 years ago by a colonel who said something to him that he had never forgotten. The operators who last in this work are not the ones who can overpower the most things. They are the ones who can see the most clearly. The colonel had tapped his own temple. The instrument is up here. Everything else is in service of it. Vance had spent 17 years developing the instrument. He could assess a security situation in the time it took most people to look around the room. He could read the power dynamics of a community from the way people moved through it, who deferred to whom, and at what speed, and with what quality of deference. He could determine within a conversation whether someone was telling him what they believed or what they wanted him to believe, and he could often determine, within the same conversation, why. He was very good at his work. What he was finding in his second year embedded with the 7th Division in Maiduguri was that being very good at his work meant being unable to avoid knowing things that his official mandate required him not to act on. He knew from the signals intelligence that ran through his encrypted terminal that the mining cartel coordinating the displacement operations in Borno and Plateau was moving its processed minerals through a chain of Cypriot intermediaries to commodity traders in London and Geneva and Hong Kong. He knew from the financial intelligence annex that came from CIA Abuja that several of those commodity traders were suppliers to companies in the United States whose products were described in marketing materials as ethically sourced and conflict-free. He knew, because he had written a detailed report and transmitted it through proper channels, that disinformation was in a queue in Langley and had been assigned a tracking number and would eventually be reviewed by someone who would determine that the diplomatic complications of acting on it outweighed the benefits. He had read enough tracking number responses to know what they meant. What troubled him, what had been troubling him for 4 months, a low-grade fever below the threshold of his usual operational focus, was the gap between what he knew and what was being done with what he knew. The gap was not unusual. It was, in fact, characteristic of intelligence work, where the distance between information and action was always longer than the uninitiated imagined. But this gap had faces in it. The reports that crossed his terminal had faces: IDP camp populations, displacement numbers, attack casualty figures. The faces were not abstract. He had begun, in the evenings, to drive in civilian clothes through parts of Maiduguri. His official role did not require him to visit. He told himself this was area familiarization. It was something else. He found the Suya spot by following his nose, which was a legitimate navigation method. The shipping container that housed it, on Shawulaminu Way, had been converted with the practical ingenuity of someone who understood that good Sula required specific temperatures and specific smoke, and that these requirements overrode aesthetics. Alhaji Musa, the owner, had cut ventilation gaps in the container walls, installed a custom grill of his own fabrication, and achieved a wood-fire temperature that produced meat with a crust of spice and smoke that Vance, who had eaten suya on 3 continents, assessed as genuinely extraordinary. He went back the following evening. On the 3rd evening, Alhaji Musa refilled his paper cup without being asked, and said in English considerably more fluent than his customary operating register, "You are looking for someone." Vance looked up from his food, looking for Kudsua. You found that the first evening, Alhaji Musa began the unhurried process of adjusting the coals beneath his grill, an operation that required and received his full attention, even while he continued speaking. The man you are looking for also likes this suya. He used to come every Thursday with a woman in a nurse's uniform. He has not been here in some months. But people who know him have been here recently. Aunt said nothing. I am not suggesting anything, Haji Musa said. I am making an observation. This spot has been a meeting place for 22 years. Maiduguri is a small city when you know how to look at it. Things happen here, and I am in the middle of a public road, and I am present every evening." He looked at Vance for the first time since the conversation began. "If you wish to arrange to encounter certain people here, the best time is usually Wednesday evenings, between 7 and 8. After that, the area around the governor's office generates additional vehicle traffic that makes parking complicated." He returned his attention to his coals. Vance finished his suya. "Thank you," he said. "Come back Thursday." Al-Haji Musa said, "I have goat." The meeting on Wednesday happened in the conventional way of meetings that are not supposed to be happening. Two people who have been told to be somewhere at a certain time, eating food that provides cover for the length of a conversation, not looking at each other any more than the food requires. Obinna came first, alone, and spent 40 minutes in the area before sitting down, because 40 minutes of observation was his minimum threshold in an unfamiliar meeting location. He ate suya with the composed concentration of someone who is simultaneously eating suya and maintaining full situational awareness of a 200-meter radius. Vance arrived at 7:23 a.m. He sat down with the controlled nonchalance of someone who has practiced looking like he is not practicing it. For several minutes, both men ate. "You are the one who has been adjusting the signal's feed," Obinna said, without preamble, in English that was deliberately quiet and precisely enunciated. "The intercepts we have been receiving, the anomalous ones that show ISWP patrol positions 4 hours before they move, someone is curating those. Someone with NSA access is cleaning the metadata and pointing them at us." Vance chewed suya. "That is an interesting theory." "It is not a theory. The correlation between the intercepts and the observable positions is too consistent to be anything else. I spent 12 years in military intelligence before I was court-martialed. I can read a surveillance fingerprint." He paused. "I am not filing a complaint. Those intercepts have saved lives. I am establishing the basis of a conversation." Vance looked at him directly for the first time. "What do you want from the conversation?" "I want to know what you want from us," Obinna said. "I have worked in environments where Americans provide help without strings. They are rare environments. Usually the strings are the point." "Fair." Vance set down his food. "There is a financial and logistical chain that connects what is happening in the Borno Plateau corridor to American interests. Specifically, minerals from the mining operations funded by the cartel are processed through Cypriot traders and end up in the supply chains of 3 major American battery technology firms. Those firms are significant donors to certain members of the Senate Armed Services Committee. The political will to address the Nigerian situation is therefore suppressed at the source." Obinna was quiet. "A complete documentation of that chain," Vance continued, "transmitted to the right journalists, would produce political consequences that I am not authorized to pursue through official channels. The people who would need to pursue it are the same people with reasons not to. You want evidence. I want the situation to change. Evidence is one mechanism. Your militia defeating the force protecting the mining operations is another. Ideally both simultaneously, from different directions." Vance paused. "I have a personal moral problem with what is happening here. I am attempting to address it within the constraints available to me. A personal moral problem." Obinna said it without inflection, as a data point. "Yes, most Americans with personal moral problems about what happens in Africa write letters to their congressmen." "I have done that too," Vance said. It was not sufficient. Obinna looked at him for a long moment, with the practiced, calibrating attention that he gave to everything that needed calibrating. Then he reached under the table, and Vance slid the ruggedized tablet across to him without looking at it. "Thermal imaging," Vance said. 16 square kilometer coverage, recentered on demand, 4-minute update cycle. No metadata, no provenance trail." He paused. "That tablet does not exist. The imagery on it does not exist. As far as any official record is concerned, this conversation is not happening." Obinna's hand rested on the tablet. He did not pick it up yet. And you want what? Exactly. A copy of the ledger when you get it. And Vance hesitated, one precise, uncharacteristic hesitation. I want to meet the pastor. Why? Because what I have read about what he has built is the only thing I have encountered in 15 years in this region that is actually working. He paused. And because in my experience, the men who build things that work are unusual, and when they appear, it is worth the effort to understand how. Obina considered this. He picked up the tablet. I will arrange the meeting, he said. It will not be here. It will be somewhere that I choose, at a time that I choose, and you will come alone. He paused. And Captain, if at any point I determine that this relationship is being used to build a case against Caleb Pam or the Savannah Lions, I will end it in a way that is bad for both of us. We understand each other. Completely, Vance said. They finished their suya without speaking. Alhaji Musa refilled both cups as they left, charged them both fairly, and returned to his coals with the expression of a man who has seen many such evenings and has no particular opinion about any of them, which was itself a form of opinion. Chapter 7. What Grows in the Dark. The Mountain Camp. Month 4. Blessing the Adao arrived at the camp on the flatbed of a supply truck at 11 in the morning on a Thursday, which was not a day with particular significance, but which was, in Blessing's personal cosmology, the best day to begin a thing, because Thursday was sufficiently late in the week that the enthusiasm of Monday had been replaced by actual momentum. She was 25. She was not what the camp expected. What the camp expected, though no one had articulated this expectation, because expectations of this kind exist below the level of language, was one of two things: a traumatized woman in need of resources and protection, or a woman who had assumed quasi-military urgency as a kind of costume, but performed competence in ways that were ultimately performative. This was not a cynical expectation. It was the expectation produced by the actual population of people arriving at the camp, who were mostly either traumatized or performing, and often both. What arrived was something else. She stepped off the truck, looked around the camp with the unhurried, comprehensive attention of a teacher entering a new classroom, and said, not to Obina, who was the most senior person visible, not to Caleb, who was standing 10 feet away, but to no one in particular, in the voice of someone making an observation rather than a complaint. The water purification situation here is a disaster. This was accurate. The camp's water supply came from a spring 200 meters up the ridge, filtered through a sand and charcoal system that Devu had assembled from available materials 3 weeks ago, and that was adequate when it was working and working about 60% of the time. Abana looked at her. The look he gave new arrivals was a specific look, a look that was an assessment rather than a welcome. He would get to welcome when the assessment was complete. You have a better system? He said. Yes, she said. But first, those 3 men on the ridge. She indicated the skyline above the camp, where 3 members of the militia were walking in the morning light, with the relaxed posture of people who felt safe. They are silhouetted against the sky, and any drone with a thermal camera will pick them up. Is there a reason they are walking the ridge in daylight? Complacency, Obina said. That needs to stop today, she said. Not a suggestion. Obina's expression moved through something that an observer paying close attention might have identified as the beginning of respect. Who are you? He said. Blessing Niado. Tarok. I taught secondary mathematics in Shendam for 8 years. My school burned 11 weeks ago. I organized the evacuation of 91 people. I left with 93 and arrived with 91, and the 2 are not something I discuss. She paused. I can run supply logistics, medical triage, water systems, and anything involving applied mathematics. I am also not afraid of heights, which I understand is useful in this terrain. She looked at Obina steadily. What do you need? Obina looked at her for a moment. Then he said, Come with me. Caleb noticed her, the way you notice a change in weather, not the phenomenon itself, but the shift in the atmosphere that precedes it. He was aware of her presence in the camp, in the way that you are aware of any strongly defined presence, not because she demanded attention, but because she was simply, consistently, there. She ran the supply systems with an efficiency that had quantifiable results. Waste down by 30% in the first week, water filter operational 90% of the time by the second. She found errors in the ammunition inventory that the previous system had been generating for weeks and corrected them with a single conversation that was direct without being unkind. She and Caleb worked together on the operational schedules, the rotation of positions, the supply distribution, the coordination with Kemi's runs from Maiduguri. These were practical conversations, logistics-focused, efficient. They were also something else, the kind of conversations that happen between two people who are both paying attention at the same frequency, where the practical content runs alongside a secondary current that is not practical. He was aware of this. He managed it the way he had learned to manage difficult things, directly, without pretending it was not there, and without acting on it. He wrote in his notebook, in the small hours, "I think about Kemi every day, her face before she drove away, the way she held her hand over mine on the Bible. I think about her in the hospital, treating the people who come out of the same darkness we are fighting, which is a form of courage that does not get written about in military histories. I love her. It is not a comfortable love. It has been stretched across distance and danger, and the things this season has made of both of us. But it is mine. It is mine, and I am not willing to lose it to proximity and the warmth of someone else in a cold place." He looked at what he had written. He did not cross it out. He found Obina the following morning. "I need to tell you something," he said. "I know," Obina said. Without looking up from the map he was annotating. "How do you know?" "Because you are 28 years old, and you have been living in the mountain camp for 4 months, and the woman who runs our supply logistics is formidable and present, and you are a human being." He paused. "Have you done anything?" "No." "Then there is nothing to confess and nothing to manage except yourself, which is always the hardest work." He looked up. "Kemi is a good woman, Caleb. Do not ruin something real for the warmth of someone else in a cold place." Caleb looked at him. "Those are almost exactly the words I wrote last night," he said. Obina looked back at his map. "Then know it louder," he said, "and keep knowing it." Maiduguri, Kemi's world. Kemi Adeyemi worked 14-hour shifts at the University of Maiduguri Teaching Hospital, and then the hours after that, in the way that people work when they have found a purpose large enough to override the body's need for rest. The hospital was operating at 300% capacity and 50% staffing. This was not a sustainable arrangement. It was the arrangement they had. She had been a nurse for 4 years, long enough to know that sustainable was not the operative concept in the crisis environment. The operative concept was sufficient, which was a lower bar, and one that could sometimes, by extraordinary effort, be cleared. She treated gunshot wounds, the entry wound, the exit wound, the internal damage that the trajectory of a bullet makes as it passes through tissue and bone and changes everything it touches. She treated machete wounds, which had a different quality of damage, slower and more deliberate. She treated burns. She treated the compound fractures produced by vehicle accidents on roads that had been damaged by explosive devices. She treated, in the small hours when the wards were quiet and the other nurses were taking the sleep that was available, the wounds that had no physical location, the ones that lived in the eyes of the people who came to her from the camps, the ones that would not resolve with wound care, antibiotics, and time. She had also, in the spaces between the clinical work, in building something. It had not been a decision so much as a gradual recognition that the information coming through her ward, the patients, their histories, the communities they came from, the circumstances of their displacement, was a form of intelligence. That if you listened carefully and recorded systematically and connected the patterns, the ward of a teaching hospital in Maiduguri was a kind of map of the violence in the region, updated daily. She listened, she recorded, she connected. She developed, through a colleague with the cousin in the land registry and a friend at the Federal Ministry of Mines, a parallel documentation of the mining concessions in the affected regions. She connected patients to the journalists who came through Maiduguri, the ones who were actually going to write about it, not the ones who were going to file a 2-paragraph wire story and leave. She organized a network of nurses in the satellite clinics, at the displacement camps, in the smaller hospitals in Bayo and Konduga and Gwosa, who were doing the same thing, who were recording and listening and connecting, and who sent what they learned to Kemi through encrypted messages that Vance had arranged for them, using an application that a university student in Abuja maintained from his dorm room. She was not a soldier. She was doing something different from what the soldiers were doing, and possibly something that would outlast it. She thought about Caleb every day. She thought about his face on the step of the burned church, the specific flatness of it, the way the light behind his eyes had changed. She thought about the Caleb who had preached on the peace that surpasses understanding with his open hand extended, and a Caleb who had said nothing when Obina asked what would happen inside him when the moment was real. She loved both of these people. She was not sure they were the same person anymore. She was sitting at the nurse's station at midnight on a Tuesday, compiling the week's records, when the two men appeared in the corridor. She noticed them because they were wrong for the corridor. The posture was wrong, not the posture of visitors, not the posture of staff, the way they positioned themselves relative to the door. She had time to notice this, and to begin to form the thought that followed, and then one of them said, "Nurse at DME, please come with us," and the night changed entirely. Chapter 8. The Weight of a Brother. Maiduguri Government Guest House, Tuesday night. General Ibrahim Sani had the manner of a man who had long since stopped needing other people's approval, which was a manner that could, in certain lights, resemble dignity and was, on closer examination, something older. He was 61 years old and had retired from the Nigerian army at the rank of Major General 4 years ago, at which point he had transitioned from official power to the kind of power that does not appear on organizational charts and is therefore harder to hold accountable. He sat across from Kemi in the air-conditioned sitting room of the government guest house, air-conditioned to a temperature designed to make the room feel like a different country from the one outside, with the comfortable authority of a man conducting routine business. He had offered her water, which was on the table. He had not offered her anything else. He had given her 45 minutes of waiting, during which a television played CNN on mute, images of a world elsewhere, having problems that were elsewhere, and this had been the opening move in a sequence whose purpose was to establish, without the vulgarity of explicit statement, who was in control of the time. He sat down across from her. He said her name as a confirmation of fact, not a greeting. "Kemi Adeyemi, General," she said. She had decided, in the car, that whatever happened in this room, she would be precise. Not warm, not hostile. Precise. "You are engaged to Pastor Caleb Pam," he said. "The man who has been conducting armed operations against government-approved security operations in the Goza-Bama corridor. I am a nurse at MTH," she said, a small smile. "Yes. And a nurse is also a fiancé, and a fiancé is also a person with information." He paused. "Your brother, Tobena Adeyemi, 22, University of Maiduguri, 3rd year Business Administration. He was detained 3 days ago near Konduga, while on what his friends describe as a drive. The room, which had already been cold, became a different kind of cold. Why was he detained? He was in an area subject to security restrictions," Sonny said. "The details are less important than the resolution. Young men in security holding are, as I say, resilient, and we have no particular interest in this one, except as it pertains to a conversation and I need to have." He looked at her steadily. the location of the Savannah Lions command base, the GPS coordinates of their primary camp. That information, provided to me tonight, resolves Tobena's situation. She looked at the glass of water on the table. She thought, Caleb. She thought, this is a man who has done this before, who has practiced this specific conversation, who knows exactly what it produces in the person sitting across from him, who has calibrated the temperature of the room and the length of the weight and the way the mention of a name lands. She thought, Toby, who still asked her to send data for his phone. Toby, who had called her last week excited about a course he would discovered on digital marketing, who had a life ahead of him that was still mostly potential, mostly future. I want to hear his voice, she said. Sonny looked at her. Then he produced a phone and made a call and held the phone out to her. The voice that came through was Toby's voice. She would have known it anywhere, in any condition, at any hour. He was frightened. He was managing the frightened. He said, Kemi, I am, and then the call was cut. 3 words, a voice. Her brother, somewhere in the machinery of this man's world. She returned the phone. She sat with the information. In the medical training she had done, early in her career, they had taught her about triage, the practice of making decisions about who gets care in what order, when there are not enough resources for everyone. The principle was simple in theory. You assess, you prioritize, you act. The practice was different. The practice was sitting with the knowledge that your prioritization produces a consequence for someone, and that the consequence is not abstract. She was doing triage now. She thought about the camp, Caleb, Obina, Musa, James, Daishong, Blessing, all of them. She thought about what the GPS coordinate would produce. She thought about Caleb specifically, what his chances were if the camp was compromised, and she assessed this with the brutal accuracy of someone who has learned not to manage reality with hope. His chances were not 0. He was resourceful. He was mobile. He might get out. Might. She thought about Toby. 22. Digital marketing. Future. She looked at the general. I will need time to get the information, she said. The coordinates are on an encrypted device that I do not have with me. How much time? 2 hours. He nodded. He stood up with the easy, unhurried movement of a man who has arranged the result he wanted and is now simply waiting for it to arrive. I will have someone drive you back to the hospital. The same vehicle will collect you in 2 hours. He paused at the door. Nurse DDM me. I want to be clear that I have no interest in this becoming complicated. Information, resolution. That is the whole of it. She nodded. The ride back to the hospital took 14 minutes. She sat in the back of the vehicle and looked out at Maiduguri, going past. The night stalls with their generator-powered lights, the Okadas weaving between the larger vehicles, a group of young men outside a video game parlor, life going on with the ordinary tenacity of life in a city that has been living alongside danger long enough to have developed routines around it. She got out at the hospital. She went to the nurse's station. She sat down at the small table with the box she had kept there, the box that held, among other things, a prepaid phone she used for communications with the camp's supply network. She opened it. She looked at the phone for a long time. She was thinking about the wedding fabric under her bed, the specific weight and texture of it, the aso oak her mother had helped choose, the color that she and Caleb had agreed on after 2 evenings of disagreement, and a final moment of simultaneous decision-making that had made them both laugh in the market in Maiduguri. She was thinking about his voice on the phone, their last full conversation. I love you. I will come back. Wait for me. She picked up the phone. She opened the encrypted application. She typed, slowly and with absolute precision, the 11-digit GPS coordinate of the mountain camp. She pressed send. She closed the application. She put the phone back in the box and closed the box and folded her hands on the table in front of her and sat very still while something in her that could not be recovered made the journey from intact to broken. She did not weep. Not yet. The weeping would come later, in the small hours, in the nurse's bathroom where no one would hear it. For now she sat with what she had done and held it, and did not look away from it, because looking away was a form of cowardice she had decided she was not capable of. She thought, Caleb will survive. He is the kind of man who survives. She thought, God forgive me. She thought, God forgive me. She said it twice, even in the thinking. Chapter 9. The Falling. Gwoza Bama Corridor. Month 7. He was moving between two ridge positions, the Wusa and James Tanko. It was a routine movement. He had made this transit 40 times. The same path, the same timing, the same spacing between the three of them that Abina had prescribed, close enough for mutual support, far enough that a single burst of fire could not take all three simultaneously. The camp's defenses had not been compromised in 7 months. They had been compromised 11 hours ago. He did not know this. The first shot dropped Musa. Not from the front, from the right, from a position on the ridge above them. That should have been empty and was not, which meant the position had been occupied before they left the camp, which meant the timeline of the compromise was at minimum 4 hours, which meant his mind was performing all of this analysis while his body was already running, because his body had been trained for 7 months, moved before his mind finished its sentences. Second shot dropped James. He ran through the scrub, down the ravine wall, using the terrain the way he had been taught, not running away, running towards something, toward the tree line 60 meters below, where the darkness would absorb him. 40 meters, 30, 20, something struck the back of his head. Not a shot, a blow from behind. Something heavy, from a man who had been in the ravine below him, and had timed the strike to the trajectory of his descent. His legs went independently of his will, and the ground came up, and the darkness was not the darkness of the tree line, but of somewhere else entirely. He woke in a vehicle, moving. Hands bound with plastic tie at the wrists. Behind him, the floor vibrating with road. The sound outside the vehicle was the forest. The specific ambient sound of the Sambisa at speed, trees passing, the road noise absorbing and being absorbed. He lay still. He took inventory. He was alive. His head was in significant pain. His wrists were secured at a gauge that suggested professional binding rather than improvised restraint. The vehicle was moving generally east, based on the direction of what he could see of the sky through a gap at the door edge. He had been taken. He had been taken because someone had transmitted his position. He thought about who had the position. He thought through the list of people with access to the GPS coordinates of the camp. He arrived, after a brief and terrible interval of reasoning, at the person who was left when all other options were eliminated. He lay in the vehicle, and he held this knowledge, and he did not allow himself to feel it, because feeling it was a luxury for a time when feeling it was survivable. Survive first, everything else after. What happened in the following 11 days is not something that benefits from extended narration. This is not evasion. It is a recognition that certain kinds of suffering have been described in literature so many times, in so many registers, with so many different intentions, that adding another description risks doing the opposite of what description intends. Instead of making the experience more real, it makes it more familiar, more categorized, less felt. What happened to Caleb Pam in the Sambisa happened to him. It was not a narrative event. It was a physical reality whose damage was catalogued in his body, and will not be fully inventoried here, because his body, not this book, is the appropriate record. What can be said? Commander Tariq was methodical. He operated with the flat professionalism of someone executing a procedure, and the procedure had a specific purpose, information, and when the information was not forthcoming, the procedure continued anyway, because the secondary purpose of the procedure was the education of the subject. cost of non-compliance, and this educational purpose remained valid, even when the informational purpose had been exhausted. Caleb did not give information, because he had calculated, correctly, that the information they wanted, the location of the full network, the names of contacts, the identity of the American intelligence source, would not help them, since they already had the camp coordinates. Everything else he had was worth less than the pain of giving it. On the 5th day, they brought Zainab's hijab. On the 8th day, his left eye swelled shut. On the 10th day, 3 ribs fractured. On the 11th day, Commander Tariq came at evening and said, with the same flat, procedural tone, "Tomorrow morning, brother, we will finish this." He left. The ant crossed the dirt floor. Caleb closed his eye, and the darkness changed. Chapter 10. Beyond the dark. Somewhere not of this world. The pain did not fade. It was swallowed. This is the distinction that matters, and the one that Caleb would spend years attempting, with partial success, to communicate. Not removed, not relieved, not suspended. Swallowed, consumed by something larger than itself, the way a candle is not extinguished by morning, but simply rendered unnecessary by a light that operates on a different scale. The pain was still there, in the accurate sense that the information of it was stored in his body. But its significance, the way that pain usually organizes the entire attention of a person experiencing it, becomes the dominant country of the interior, had changed. It had become a minor territory in the landscape that extended much further in every direction. He was standing in a river. The word river is insufficient. What he was standing in moved with the purposeful, living intentionality of a river. It flowed. It had direction. It had temperature, but it was not water. Or it was water in the way the music is sound, technically accurate, and fundamentally inadequate. It was luminous in the manner of something that generates light rather than reflecting it. It passed through him rather than around him, not his skin but his actual self. Whatever part of a person constitutes the actual self, the irreducible core below the personality, and the history and the accumulated decisions. Through that, and as it passed through, it took things, not memories. The memories remained. He would remember what had happened to him in the cell, would remember it with accuracy and in detail for the rest of his life. What the river took was different. The toxins that the memories had deposited, the rage had curdled into something that lived in his shoulders and his jaw. The grief that had turned, in 7 months, from clean pain into a hardened, weaponized thing that he had used as fuel for the killing. The bitterness, specifically the bitterness, the way that sustained injustice deposits itself in the body, not as grief, but as a dark mineral that changes the chemistry of everything it touches. These things left him as dark vapor leaves clean air, completely, without residue. He felt clean, not cleansed. That word implies a prior condition of dirtiness that the cleaning addresses. This was something prior to both clean and dirty, the feeling of a self restored to its original state, before the deposits of 7 months of war and 11 days of captivity and 30 years of accumulating the small wounds that ordinary life inflicts. He felt, the only word, original, as if whatever he most fundamentally was had been temporarily covered by the sediment of circumstance, and was now, briefly, uncovered. He wept. It was not a distressing weeping. It was the weeping of release, the specific physical release of someone who has been carrying more than the body was designed to carry, and has been given, suddenly and without expectation, permission to put it down. He wept for his father, the particular texture of the grief for his father, the specific, irreplaceable loss of a man who had been not just a parent, but a particular presence in the world, a man whose margin notes in his Bible said something that no other person's margin notes said, who had stood at the pulpit with his arms spread in the most human then inadequate and magnificent gesture of protection. He wept for Zainab, who was 16, and somewhere in the Sambisa, and he wept for what 16 means, and for the specific tragedy of 16, being converted by force into something it should never have had to become. He wept for the 23 members of his congregation. He wept for the Chibok girls, for Leah Sharibu, for every person in every displacement camp who had gone to sleep on a mat in a tent and was trying to remember the particular quality of their own bed, the smell of their own walls. He wept for the miners and the traffickers and the politicians and the generals who had chosen this, who had looked at the cost of it, the human cost, and decided it was acceptable, and he wept for them with a grief that surprised him, not the grief of the victim for the harm received, but the deeper grief of someone who has been shown what a human soul is capable of choosing when it is fully in the grip of the darkness. He wept for Commander Tariq. This surprised him most. He sat in the river of light and wept for the man who had designed his torture, and the weeping was real, and he did not understand it, and then he became aware that he was not alone. The presence arrived the way warmth arrives in a cold room, not as an intrusion, not as an event, but as a gradual clarification of something that had been there all along and was only now available to the attention. Caleb became aware of it by degrees. First as a change in the quality of the light. It had always been extraordinary, but it deepened, became more precise, acquired a directional quality, as if oriented toward something. Then, as a change in the air, a word insufficient for what surrounded him here, but what he breathed became more charged, more alive, carrying something that lungs were not designed for, and managed anyway. Then as a sound, or something that occupied the frequency band where sound lives, not music and not speech, but something that contained the essential qualities of both. Then he saw him. What Caleb saw, approaching across the field of living light, was a figure clothed in garments of a white that did not come from the white of fabric. The white of fabric is the white of something bleached or woven. This was the white of something that generated itself, the white of a color that contained all colors, the way pure light contains the full spectrum. He walked with the unhurried pace of someone for whom time is a resource of a different kind than it is for persons operating within it. His face. Caleb had spent 28 years accumulating images of this face, from the paintings on church walls, the illustrations in children's Bibles, the countless portraits produced over 2,000 years of devotion and imagination and artistic tradition. He had known intellectually that these images were approximations. He had not known, and could not have known, what the approximation was approximating. The face was. There was no single register for this. Familiar in the way that the face of someone you have loved your entire life is familiar, even when seen after a long absence. Not familiar from a specific prior encounter, but familiar at the level below encounter, the level of fundamental recognition, the recognition you have for something that you are, in some part of your being, made from. The eyes were the color of deep water in morning light. They held grief and joy simultaneously, and without contradiction. The grief of someone who has seen every moment of every suffering ever experienced by every person who has ever lived, and who has borne the weight of it, without deflecting it, or reducing it, or deciding that any of it was acceptable. And the joy of someone who knows, with absolute certainty, that is not the certainty of hope or faith, but the certainty of direct knowledge, how the story ends. Knows eyes. Caleb saw his father, not a vision or a symbol. His father, present, known, seen, the way you see someone in the eyes of a person who loves them profoundly and is thinking of them. Elder Daniel Pam, reflected in the eyes of Christ, was not diminished or altered or made abstract. He was himself, the man with the margin notes and the bicycle and the good laugh that started slow and then took over his entire face. He was himself, and he was seen and he was held. Caleb fell. He did not choose to fall. His body simply understood that this was not the appropriate position for standing. A hand reached down to him. He felt, before he saw it, the specific quality of a hand that has known extraordinary pain willingly borne, the scar on the wrist that was not historical, not past, but present and permanent. A hand that had been through the thing it had been through, and had come back from it, and had not allowed the experience to close it. "Rise, Caleb," the Lord said. The voice. He would attempt to describe the voice many times, in different contexts and registers. Over the years that followed, he would always say, "It is not possible." He would say, "The closest I can come is this. You know the voice of someone who has never said anything false. Not never been wrong, never said anything they did not believe to be true, never spoken from any motivation other than the genuine desire to communicate what is real. In your entire life, you have never heard a voice like this. When you hear it, you recognize it, not because you have heard it before, but because you have been listening for it, without knowing that was what you were listening for." He rose. They stood facing each other in the field. "You have been very brave," the Lord said. "I've been very angry," Caleb said. The honesty of it, in this place, required no effort. It was simpler than lying. It was simply the description of what was true. Yes, both things are true. A pause. Pause, someone searching for what to say next. But the pause of someone who has all the time available and is choosing to let the truth of what has just been said occupy the space it requires. "Tell me what you have built." "An army." He paused. "Men who kill to protect the people who cannot protect themselves. Men I trained. Men whose souls I changed in the training and did not think about what the change was costing. Tell me what it has cost you." He looked at his hands. In this place they were his ordinary hands, not the hands of a fighter, not the hands of a man who had learned to load weapons with the automatic efficiency of practiced motion. They were the hands he had grown up with, the hands that had held his father's Bible, the hands that had rested on the heads of people he baptized, that had been held by Kemi's hands across the table on the evening she accepted his proposal, and they had both been so happy they were almost frightened of it. "My soul," he said, "I have been paying with my soul, and with the souls of the men who trusted me, and the souls of the men you have killed," the Lord said, not as an accusation, as a completion. Yes, a silence. In the field, the grass moved in something that was not wind, but performed the function of wind, the movement of the living thing under the influence of a larger living thing. "They were killing us," Caleb said. "They were taking children. It burned my church." "They, yes," the Lord said again, and the grief in his voice for every one of these things, for the church and the children and Zainab's pink hijab, and Elder Daniel spread on the altar steps, was so personal and so immense that Caleb understood. In a way he had understood the concept, but never the fact. The grief of God is not theological. It is not managed or abstract or distributed among so many events that any individual event receives only a fraction. It is complete for each thing. Every person who has been harmed has been grieved for completely, without dilution. "I showed them what I showed you," the Lord said. "Everyone. Tariq, the men who raided your church, the politicians who signed the papers, before they were fully formed into what they became, before the choices accumulated into the architecture of cruelty you encountered. I spoke to them. I showed them what they were made to be." He paused. "They chose otherwise, which means that what they are now is not all that they are. It is what they chose. And what is chosen can be unchosen, if someone shows them what they chose against, and killing them ends that possibility." Yes, Caleb looked at the field. He looked at the river. He thought about Tariq's face, the flat, procedural face of the man who had administered 11 days of systematic suffering with the detached efficiency of a man doing a job. He tried to see in that face what the Lord had said, the child who existed before the choices, the person who had been shown something and had turned away from it. He tried, and he could not quite see it. "Show me," he said. The landscape shifted. He was shown Tariq, not as he had experienced him, not the flat face and the procedural voice and the rubber hose. He was shown Tariq at 7 years old, in a classroom in a village school, getting the hardest problem on the board right, and looking at the teacher with an expression of uncomplicated joy, the joy of a mind finding that it works, that the world is legible and responsive, that effort produces results. It was such a specific and recognizable joy, the joy of a child discovering their own capability, that Caleb's chest moved in a way that was involuntary. He was shown Tariq at 11, when the army came to his village, the Nigerian army, in a counter-terrorism operation that the official record would describe as a successful sweep of a suspect area. What the operation looked like from inside the village, from the position of an 11-year-old watching from behind the compound wall, is different from the official record. Caleb watched it happen and understood, with the full comprehension available in this place, where the operation appeared in the official record and where it appeared in the life of this child, and the gap between those two locations was where a person began to be constructed into what they were. When they arrived at the cell, he was shown Tariq at 15 in the madrasa. He was shown the patience and precision with which a young man who had experienced violence at the hands of the state and been given no framework for understanding it, except as evidence of a cosmic war between competing moral orders, he was shown how carefully and methodically you could take that young man's real experience and real anger and real intelligence and give it a shape. Give the enemy a face. Give the war a theology. Give the violence a justification that felt, from inside the framework, like clarity. He was shown how a human being becomes what Tariq was. It was not the story of a monster. It was the story of a person with a person's beginning, a person's intelligence and joy and hunger for meaning, who had been worked on by darkness over many years until the person was almost entirely obscured beneath the weapon. Almost, the Lord said, and the word carried everything. He was shown Kemi. He was shown the full sequence of her Tuesday night, the car, the guest house, the voice of Toby on the phone, the nurse's station, the phone in the box, the coordinates typed with absolute precision. He was shown her face as she pressed send, which was not the face of a traitor in any story he had ever read. It was the face of a person who loves true things and has been forced into a mathematics that has no answer, that is not also a wound. He felt, looking at her across whatever distance and dimension separated them, a love so complete and so certain that it was less like an emotion and more like a structural fact, the way gravity is a structural fact, not a mood. She had broken something. He loved her. Both things were simultaneously entirely true, without the truth of one diminishing the truth of the other. He was shown Obinna. He was shown his friend moving through the dark of the Sambisa with 12 men, with the focused, anguished intentionality of a man trying to undo an error whose consequences are unfolding in real time. He was shown the love that lived in Obinna beneath the fury and the tactical brilliance and the court-martial bitterness and the carefully maintained cynicism about God, a love for this specific person, for Caleb, that was Obinna's most closely guarded, least acknowledged possession. He was shown things he could not translate into language. Not visions, but experiences, direct communications to the part of the mind that exists below language and is therefore below the reach of language's limitations. Truths that entered not as propositions to be evaluated, but as knowledge to be inhabited. He understood that the war was real, the injustice was real. The murdered and the displaced and the dispossessed were real, and the crime against them was real, and it demanded a response. He understood that the response he had been making was consuming the men who made it, and that this was not incidental but structural, that violence as a method of resistance to violence reproduced the violence, just with different flags on it. He understood that there was another method, available, that operated by a different physics entirely, Not the physics of force against force, where the larger force wins, but the physics of transformation, where the objective is not to overpower the enemy, but to change what the enemy is. He understood that this method would cost. He understood that he was willing to pay. He stood in the field of living light, with all of this inside him, his hands full of it, and he looked at the Lord and said, "I am afraid." "Good," the Lord said, and his voice contained the full recognition of what courage is, not the absence of fear, but the choice made in fear's presence. "You have been very courageous with a sword. I am asking you to be courageous without one, to walk into the places you have been walking, with the same intentionality and the same willingness to die, but carrying something different." "What if it does not work?" Caleb asked. He asked it as a genuine question, not as doubt, but as the request of someone who needs accurate information before they can commit. The Lord looked at him with the eyes that contained the grief and the joy. "It will work, Caleb. I will not deceive you about the cost. People will die. In this, as in every campaign for anything real, the enemy will adapt. You will face moments when the method seems impossible. But love does not fail. This is not reassurance offered to comfort you. It is a structural fact about the nature of the universe, as reliable as gravity. The darkness you are in is real, and it is temporal. Love is neither." He reached out and placed both hands on Caleb's face, the scarred hands, the hands that had been through the thing they had been through, and had come back, and had not allowed the experience to close them, those hands on his face, and the eyes that contained everything. "Go," he said, "and be not afraid." The light expanded, the field became all light, the all light became warmth, and the warmth became sound, and the sound became voices, insistent, afraid, beloved. Abina's voice, saying his name, saying it the way you say someone's name when you are not sure they can hear you, and the not being sure is the thing that is making you say it louder. "Caleb." The light faded. The dirt floor appeared below him. The weight of the body returned. He heard his own breath. He was back. Chapter 11. The Long, Dark Run. Sambisa Forest. Before dawn, Obina had been in position for 5 hours and 23 minutes. He knew the exact duration because he checked it every 11 minutes, the interval at which the compound's perimeter guards completed their rotation, and each check was also a time check. 5 hours of lying in wet sawgrass, and the particular absolute stillness of a man who has trained his body to maintain this position, and who has, beyond the training, a motivation that overrides the body's preferences. The thermal tablet showed the compound in green and white. 6 perimeter guards. He had numbered them in his mind, Guard 1 through Guard 6, and had mapped their rotations over the past 18 hours into a sequence he could predict within 90 seconds. The generator shed, the 3 structures, the vehicle park, and in the leftmost structure, the smallest structure, a heat signature so faint it was on the edge of the instrument's resolution, a body generating almost no heat. He had been watching this signature for 5 hours. It had not moved. It was not nothing. He pressed the transmit button on the radio. 1 click, the agreed signal, and waited. 2 clicks came back from the eastern approach position. His men were ready. Around him in the dark, in the sawgrass, Dalvuk Yang, who had been an engineer before this, and whose specific gift was a silent malfunction, James Tanko, recovered sufficiently from his wound to insist on being here, and correct in his insistence. 9 other men, whose names he knew, and whose capabilities he had assessed, and whose presence here was both a tactical asset and the weight of a responsibility he had no language adequate to describe. 11 men, 12 with him, all of them doing what 12 men do when they are in wet sawgrass at 3 a.m., watching a compound where someone they love is dying. They were doing the stillness. 310, he said into the radio, very quietly. "We move at 310. He did not say, "He is alive." The signature was too faint for that certainty. He did not say, We have time. They had approximately 90 minutes before the compound would begin its pre-dawn activity, and the window would close. He did not say anything else. He watched the thermal display and waited and thought about the Tuesday night in the uncompleted building in Gwoza, when he and Caleb had first met, the stick in the dirt, the map, the voice that said nothing when asked what happened inside him when it was real. He had believed that nothing. He had believed it as a tactical asset. He had not known then what it would cost. First. Davu reached the generator shed at 306. What he did there took 4 minutes and produced no sound. He was a man who had spent 15 years managing complex systems, the generators, compressors, and pressure equipment of the Nigerian oil sector, and who understood, with the practitioner's intimacy, that every system has a point of minimum intervention from which maximum disruption can be achieved. He found this point. He used it. At 310, the compound went dark. Not just the lights, the generator, the backup generator, the motion sensor system, the radio equipment that was, in the absence of the generator, suddenly entirely dependent on battery backup that had been, by Davu's intervention, gently and invisibly drained over the past 4 hours. The compound was dark, silent in the way of electronics that have stopped. Obina moved. He moved with the 12 men in the pattern that Obina had drilled into them over 3 weeks, 4 going left, 4 going right, 4 staying in reserve at the tree line, as extraction cover. He himself went straight, because the signature was in the leftmost structure, and the leftmost structure was directly ahead. Guard 2 was where the thermal had put him, plus 4 seconds. Obina took him from behind with the controlled, practiced application of force to the carotid. The technique is not cruel. It produces unconsciousness in approximately 8 seconds and no permanent damage. It is the technique of someone who has been instructed not to kill unnecessarily and who has accepted the instruction. He held the man until the body's resistance was complete and lowered him to the ground with a care that was not tenderness, but was not cruelty either. The padlock on the door of the leftmost structure was a keyed padlock of modest quality. Davu, who had rejoined the forward element, dealt with it in the way that a man who understands the physics of locks deals with them, not with drama, simply with the application of appropriate force at the appropriate point. It took 11 seconds. The door opened. The smell entered the night air first. Obina knew this smell. He had learned it in places he would not name. He moved through it to the shape on the floor. Caleb. Nothing. He knelt. He put his hand flat on the chest. Felt it. The heartbeat. Weak and irregular and present. The most important piece of information he had received in 11 days. "You are alive," he said. "We are here. I have got you." He wrapped him in the thermal blanket. The body was cold, cold in a way that spoke of systems operating at their minimum, and lifted him. Caleb weighed less than he should. Obina noted this with the flat part of his mind that recorded data without processing it, and went on. They moved. They were 380 meters from the compound. Returning from an extended patrol stop, had found his colleague on the ground, and was now generating exactly the quantity of noise that an alarmed man with a radio generates. Obina ran. He ran with Caleb across his shoulders and 12 men around him, and the Sambisa at 3:30 a.m. a.m., with pursuers behind them, and a tree line ahead, was not the Sambisa of daylight. It was roots and wet ground and branches at face level, and the specific topography of a forest that was not designed for this use. He ran with the focused, furious love of a man who has already spent 11 days in this particular hell and is not going to spend 12. The tree line, the vehicles, the mountain road. He put Caleb in the back of the truck and put his hand on Caleb's chest again, heartbeat, present, and pressed his forehead against Caleb's forehead in a gesture that was not planned and that he would later claim he did not remember making. "Do not you dare," he said. "Do not you dare go. You hear me? I did not come here for a body. I came for you. Stay. Caleb's eyes did not open. The truck moved. Behind them, the Sambisa receded into the dark, carrying its secrets and its dead, and the compound where man had been dying and had not died. Chapter 12. The Rewriting. The Mountain Camp. The days after. He did not wake on the first day. He did not wake on the second. On the third morning, Kemi, who had been at the camp since the second night, was sitting beside him with a cup of tea going cold in her hands when she saw it, the quality change in his eyes, shift from absence to presence, the return. She had seen this shift in patience before, and it always produced in her the same response, a sensation in the chest that was somewhere between relief and something more fundamental than relief, the specific feeling of having been on the edge of a loss and the loss not occurring. His eyes opened. He looked at the rock ceiling of the cave. He looked at her. His face did what his face did, and then he wept. She held his hand. She did not try to stop it or redirect it or address the wound that was generating it. She had been a nurse long enough to know that there are kinds of weeping that should be contained and kinds that should be allowed their full duration. And this was the second kind, the weeping of someone releasing something that has been held past its containment point, that needs the full expression to complete itself. He wept for 2 days, not continuously, not the sustained, exhausting weeping of acute grief. In sessions, between which he slept and accepted small quantities of food, and looked at the walls, and sometimes looked at her with an expression she had no name for, but recognized, the expression of someone who has seen something that has permanently expanded the vocabulary of what they know, and trying to locate this larger vocabulary inside the smaller vocabulary available to daily life. On the 6th day, he asked for pen and paper. She gave him a notebook and watched him write, slowly because of his broken fingers, splinted now, 2 of the 3. The third had not moved correctly, and she was watching it with concern, for 4 hours. When he stopped, he had filled 17 pages in his distinctive small handwriting. She did not read it then. Later, when he gave it to her to keep, she would read it and would understand the 17 pages were the attempt to hold the vision in language before it became unreachable, to fix it in words the way you fix a color photograph by developing it quickly before the image fades. On the 7th day, he asked for everyone. Thursturk. They came, all of them. Those who were at the camp, and those who were reached by radio. Obina, Lessing, Tichung, Denden, Turka Efobu, who had arrived 4 days ago, Kulu and Gambo, who had arrived the day before, James Tanko with his arm in a sling, Musa, who had healed faster than expected, and felt guilty about this. Reverend Pofi, who had driven from Maiduguri in the dark, and was sitting slightly outside the main circle with the expression of a man attending a service at a church very different from his own, and finding it simultaneously strange and compelling. Caleb sat up with help. Kemi arranged the blanket behind him, so the cold stone of the cave wall was not immediately against his back. She gave him water. He took it with his splinted hands, carefully. He looked at the people assembled. He looked at them for a long time, each face, separately, with the attention of someone conducting an accounting. He looked at Obina last, and held that gaze the longest, and something passed between them that neither of them verbalized. Then he spoke. "I need to tell you where I went," he said. His voice was quieter than it had been, lower in the register, stripped of the pulpit resonance he had always used, not because the resonance was false, but because what he was now carrying was too large for resonance, required plainness. "I need to tell you everything, and I need you to hear it before you respond, and then you can respond," he told them. He told them for 2 hours and 15 minutes, by Reverend Puffy's watch. He told them about the river of light that was not water. He told them about what it had taken from him and what it had left. He told them about the field and the grass and the colors that had no names. He told them about the presence that arrived and what the face was like and the voice that was simultaneously rushing water, an intimate whisper, and contained in it the absolute quality of truth. He was precise about all of this. He described it the way he would describe a place he had visited, with the attention to specific sensory detail of someone who does not want to lose the specificity. He told them about Tariq. He watched this land on them, the showing of Tariq's child, the 7-year-old with the correct answer, and the uncomplicated joy, and the 11-year-old in the compound wall, and the 15-year-old in the madrasa, and the demonstration of how a person becomes what a person becomes. He watched Turka's face move through something during this. Turka, who had buried his brother and come north to fight, watched the something happen and settle and become not resolution, but a different kind of consideration. He told them about Kemi. He said it plainly, without accusation, the way he would describe weather. I was shown what she did and why she did it. I was shown the whole sequence of it. He paused. I want her to know, in front of everyone, that I understand it and I forgive it, and neither of these things are provisional. He looked at Kemi, whose face had gone to the place it went when she had nothing left with which to manage what was happening to it. I love you. That is not a variable. The cave was very quiet. He told them about the blueprint. We are going to keep fighting, he said, but the objective changes. We are not fighting for the land anymore, though the land matters. We are not fighting for survival alone, though survival matters. We are fighting for souls. He paused. The raids continue. The operations continue. But the end of every operation is not a body, it is a prisoner, and every prisoner comes to the camp not to be interrogated or punished, but to be cared for, fed, healed, shown, for as long as it takes, a love they were told did not exist. Silence. They will kill us, Turka said, quietly, with the specific knowledge of a man who has recently buried 2 family members to enemy violence. Some will, yes. Caleb did not flinch from this. I will not lie to you about the cost. It will be paid, but I have been shown something about the cost, about what it produces, in the architecture of the war at the level below what we can see. Every one of us who is willing to die, choosing love rather than violence, is a testimony that the darkness has no counter-argument for. It cannot explain us. It cannot replicate us. It cannot weaponize us. We become the thing it cannot fight. Reverend Pofi, from the edge of the circle, said very quietly, as if to himself, "My God." Blessing was looking at Caleb with the mathematics teacher's eyes, running the variables, assessing the function, calculating the output. She was quiet for a long time. "I will follow you," she said finally. She said it, which state of fact. Obina stood up. He stood up with the movement of a man who has been holding himself very still and has used up his capacity for it. "Caleb," he said. His voice was control with a precision that indicated how much was behind the control. "I hear you. I believe you experienced something real. I will not be the man who tells you your mind has broken, because I know your mind, and it has not." He stopped. "Breathe. But I cannot look at the men of this camp who have lost brothers, who have lost children, who have buried people whose deaths I am personally responsible for not preventing. I cannot look at those men and tell them to lay down their weapons and bring their enemy soup." His jaw moved. "I love you. You are my brother. And I cannot do this." He walked out of the cave. The cave held the space he had left in it. Caleb looked at the door of the cave for a long time. "Give him time," Kemi said, quietly. "He will not come back," Caleb said. "Not to this. He will come back to me, but not to this." She put her hand over his. "I know," she said. Chapter 13. The Split. The Camp. 5 days later, Obina came back on the 5th day. He came at midday, in daylight, without concealment, the way a man comes when he wants to be seen and not misunderstood. He came with 41 men behind him, the military veterans, a hardened core of the Savannah Lions, the men who had been through the most and had the least capacity for what they understood as the abrupt reversal of everything they had built. He came with the CIA weapons. He came with the armored trucks, the communications equipment, the night vision gear, and most of the ammunition stock. He came with all of it because all of it was the property of the Savannah Lions as an organization, and he had arrived at the position that he and his 41 were the Savannah Lions now. He did not come with noise. He came with the specific gravity of a man who has made a decision he has thought through completely and is not reversing, and who wants the person he is saying it to understand as immediately, so that neither of them wastes energy on the pretense of negotiation. He and Caleb stood in the clearing, behind Obina, 41 men. Behind Caleb, those who had stayed, the women, the older men, the deeply spiritual ones, the new arrivals from the south, who had not been here for the formation of the original unit, and who had come specifically because of what they had heard about a radical and different kind of war. 42, by blessings count. I cannot do it your way, Obina said. He said it not as opening argument, but as conclusion already reached. He was not asking to be persuaded. He was ending something and he wanted it ended honestly. I understand what you are telling me. I believe you experienced what you say you experienced. I am not dismissing it. He looked at Caleb with the eyes of a man looking at someone he has made a home in his chest for, over the months they have been through, and who is now looking at the same person, having a conversation that the person in his chest does not entirely recognize. But I have to look at the men behind me. I have to look at their faces and be honest. I cannot tell them that the war is over, and we should bring soup to the people who killed their children. I am not capable of it, Caleb. That is not weakness. It is the truth of what I am. I am not asking you to believe it yet, Caleb said. I am asking you to let it happen. I cannot protect you if you are walking unarmed into enemy camps. I cannot watch you from the trees and promise my men that we will not fight back when someone points a gun at you. He paused. Which means I need to go where I can fight the way I know how to fight and let you do what you are doing. And he stopped, started again, and keep watch from a distance in the way that I can. The recognition of this landed before the words that followed it. You are going to run parallel operations, Caleb said. I am going to fight this war the way it needs to be fought, from a position of someone who does not agree with your method, but also cannot let you die. Obina's voice was steady. So, when your people walk into a camp singing and praying, there will be men in the trees. You will not see them. You will not know they are there. But if someone raises a weapon, the weapon will stop before it fires. He looked at him. I cannot make my peace with your way, Caleb, but I will not leave you unprotected in it. Caleb was quiet for a moment. This is going to cost you, he said. Doing this work, killing, even in protection of people who have chosen not to kill. The weight of it. I know the weight of it, Obina said flatly. I have been carrying it for 7 months. A few more months will not collapse me. They looked at each other. There was nothing left to say, and both men understood this. Obina extended his hand. Caleb took it. Their grip held for a moment, the grip of two men who have built something together and are now building it differently, who will not be in the same place from this point forward, who know this and are choosing the handshake anyway as the truest available form of what remains between them. Do not get killed, Obina said. I will try, Caleb said. Try harder than that. He turned and walked to where his 41 were waiting. They moved out, and the vehicles moved out, and the camp was left with the 42 and the silence of a space from which significant capacity had just departed. Blessing counted heads. 42, she said. I know, Caleb said. It is enough. He looked at the road where the trucks had gone. It has to be, he said. Chapter 14. The Invasion of Love. Northern Borno. The months that followed. The first raid of the new campaign was mounted on a small Astoria logistics post, 3 kilometers inside the Sambisa, and it went the way the new raids always went. silently, surgically, and with an objective that had never preceded in the operational history of the region. 20 of them moved in, using the thermal mapping and the mountain night skills that Obanus' 7 months of training had deposited in their bodies. The post had 11 fighters. By the time the post was aware of the intrusion, 9 of them were zip-tied in the dirt, weapons secured and field stripped, phones destroyed, radio equipment disabled. 2 had fled into the forest. This was noted and accepted. Men who flee cannot be compelled into anything. Men who are captured can be offered something else. The 9 were blindfolded and walked for 3 hours through a deliberately confusing route before the blindfolds came off. What they found around them: a clean space with pallets on a compressed earth floor, thin mattresses, blankets of reasonable weight, oil lanterns giving warm light. 3 people who were not holding weapons. Kemi, in her nurse's uniform, a young woman from Turkaz community named Priscilla, who had trained as a community health worker, and a man from the Borno Evangelical Church, who had been persuaded by Reverend Pofi to come and who had agreed with specific, terrified faith of someone doing something they are not sure they are equal to. On a low table, tuo shinkafa, mian kuka, bottles of cold water, sliced mango. The 9 fighters looked around them. They looked at the food, at the blankets, at the 3 unarmed people who were looking back at them without fear, or with fear, managed to invisibility, which was what Kemi had taught them. You are afraid. You have permission to be afraid. You do not have permission to show it, because showing it communicates that they have power over you, and they do not have power over you. They looked for the catch. There is always a catch. This is the first thing you learn in the environment these men had been living in. Every offer has a condition. Every kindness has a price. Every apparent safety is a setup for a larger insecurity. They had learned this early, the way you learn things that your survival has repeatedly confirmed. Caleb came in last. He came in with the splinted fingers and the healing eye, and the specific altered quality he carried now. The stillness that was not the stillness of suppressed aggression, not the stillness of someone managing themselves, but the stillness of someone who is genuinely, entirely calm in a situation that should produce anything but calm. He sat down across from the most senior of the 9, a man of about 32, with the bearded, upright bearing of someone who has not yet decided whether to cooperate with whatever this is. My name is Caleb Pam, he said in Hausa. I was in your people's custody 11 days last month. I know what it is to be in a position you are in tonight. The zip ties, the unknowing, the waiting to find out what happens next. He paused. Here is what happens next. Nothing bad. You are going to eat. The food is good, I promise you. And you are going to sleep on a mat that is better than what you have been sleeping on in the Sambisa. And in the morning we will talk. Not interrogation. Conversation. You can say nothing if you choose. That is your right. He met the man's eyes. We are not your enemies even if you believe we are. We are the people you were told we were. The enemy, the infidel, the people whose lives are worth less than the mission. But the story you were told about us is not true. I am going to show you it is not true, beginning tonight, beginning with this food. He stood. Eat, he said. Rest. No one will harm you here. He walked out. Behind him, in the space between his walking out and the sounds that came after, was a silence of perhaps 30 seconds, the silence of 9 men sitting with an experience that their entire framework of the world did not have a category for, then the sound of a man picking up a spoon. Commander Tariq came on the 28th day. He came alone, at dusk, on foot, to the perimeter of the Kinnis camp. He came without weapons. He stood at the perimeter and identified himself by name and rank, and asked to see Caleb Pam. The guard who received him, a young man from Den's Plateau contingent named Philip, managed his own response to this information with the discipline of someone who has been trained to manage it, and who is, privately, absolutely terrified. He transmitted the request by radio. He waited. Caleb came out to the perimeter. They stood facing each other in the red dust of evening. The Mandara mountains behind Caleb had gone to purple in the dying light. Tariq's face was different from the face Caleb remembered. Not the features, but the quality behind them. The administrative flatness had cracked. Not into remorse. Not yet. Into something that preceded remorse. The condition in which remorse becomes possible. The inability to continue not knowing what you already know. "I heard what you are doing," Tariq said, in Arabic. He had good Arabic, classical Arabic, educated, which said something about the madrasa and the seriousness of what had been done to his intelligence. "I heard it from the men you captured. 4 of them have been released in the past 3 weeks. They came back to the forest. They were different." He paused. "I did not believe them. I came to see." "And what do you see?" Caleb said. Tariq looked at the camp, the lights of it, the sounds of it, the specific quality of a space where people are being cared for. He looked for a long time. "I expected you to have me shot at the perimeter," he said. "That is not what we do here." Silence. "I know what I did to you," Tariq said. He said it with the quality of someone who is making a statement they have rehearsed, and who finds, in the making of it, that rehearsal was insufficient preparation for the actual moment. "I know it precisely. I know what I ordered and what my men did and how many days it lasted." His jaw moved. "I was following doctrine. I was following orders. I am aware that neither of these things changes what it was." Caleb looked at him. He thought about the 7-year-old boy with the correct answer and the uncomplicated joy. He thought about the 11-year-old at the compound wall. He thought about what he had been shown and how it had looked and what it had felt like to weep for this man before he understood why. "Come in," Caleb said. "Eat. Rest. We will talk when you are ready." He turned and walked into the camp. He heard, after a moment, footsteps behind him. Kemi was at the fire. She saw Tariq, and she knew, because Caleb had described him fully and shown her the captured security imagery and prepared her for this as a possibility that was becoming a probability. She looked at him with the nurse's eyes, the eyes that see the patient inside the person, that have learned to distinguish between the wound and the person carrying it. She prepared a plate of food. She set it in front of him. She did this without comment, because comment was not what this moment required. Tariq looked at the plate. He looked at Kemi. He looked at the plate again. He sat down. He ate. Nobody said anything for a long time. The fire moved. The mountain dark gathered around the camp. And in the quiet of a Thursday evening, in the Mandara mountains, in a place that should not have been able to exist, and did, something cracked open in the architecture of the darkness, quietly. Without announcement, the crack was real. It was the beginning. Chapter 15. The Reckoning. Abuja, the mountains. 2 months later, Honorable Beatrice Doda received the intelligence brief at 7:14 a.m. at his office in the National Assembly complex, over a breakfast that had been prepared by his cook and delivered by his aide, and which he found, on the particular morning, difficult to finish. The brief described, in the clipped passive voice language of security reports, the following: the militia group operating in the Gwoza-Bama corridor, formerly engaged in direct armed conflict with ISWAP elements, had undergone an operational transformation. Current activities included the non-lethal capture of enemy combatants, further transportation to undisclosed locations, and a documented pattern of combatant conversion. Former ISWAP fighters voluntarily abandoning their unit affiliation and aligning with the militia. The conversion rate, the brief noted, had accelerated significantly in the past 30 days. Honorable Beatrice read this 3 times. He was a man 57 who had been in Nigerian politics for 22 years, long enough to understand that the most dangerous kind of adversary is not the one who fights you on your terms, but the one who changes the terms entirely. An armed group could be labeled a terrorist organization, isolated, bombarded, eliminated, an armed group that was converting your fighters, that was offering them something your own ideology could not counter, was a different kind of problem. He picked up his phone. He made 3 calls. The third call was to General Sani. "Destroy it," Honorable Bitrus said. He said it in the tone of a man making a business decision. No heat, no drama, the flat clarity of someone who has decided that a particular line item in the accounts needs to be closed. "I do not care about the legal framework. Use the 21 Brigade. Designate the camp a terrorist installation. Make it disappear." General Sani said what he always said, which was the thing that would be said, which was a yes. He hung up. He returned to his breakfast, which he finished. The designation came through the official channels within 72 hours. Caleb Pam, designated as leader of a proscribed armed group, the facilities at the Gwoza-Bama corridor, designated as illegal paramilitary installations. A cordon search operation, authorized under the Terrorism Prevention Act, with the specific mandate to neutralize the installation and detain its leadership. Vance had it within 4 hours of the signing. He sent it to Caleb with a note that said, "You have approximately 2 weeks. Use them." Caleb gathered the leadership of the remnant: Blessing, Denin, Kemi, Turka, Agbu, Kulu, Kambo, Reverend Pofi, Karik, and the 3 senior converted fighters who had become, in the past 2 months, something between allies and family, in the cave that served as the command space. He showed them the brief. "What do we do?" Den asked. Caleb looked at the brief for a moment. Then he set it down. "We go faster," he said, "and we make sure everyone knows what is happening here. Vance has journalists. We give them everything. The ledger, the documents, the footage from the camp, the testimonies of the converted fighters. All of it simultaneously, before the brigade gets here. And when the brigade gets here," Blessing said. "We are here," Caleb said. "We are here, and we are visible, and we are not armed, and we are singing." A silence. "Caleb," Kemi said carefully. "I know," he said. "I know exactly what it looks like. I know what it requires." He paused. "I also know what happened the last time someone walked unarmed for power and kept walking. I am asking us to be that." No one spoke for a long moment. Then Tariq said in Arabic, which Den translated quietly, "I have stood on the other side of what you are describing. I have been the man with the weapon facing the unarmed person. I know what it does to a soldier who is not fully committed to the ideology, what it does to the part of him that is still, beneath the training and the doctrine, a person." He paused. "It is not nothing. It is very far from nothing." Caleb looked at him. "Then we go," Caleb said. Chapter 16. The Singing Column. Gwoza Valley, the day of the brigade. The Harmattan came early that morning. It came from the northeast, from the Sahara, carrying its cargo of fine red dust that would spend the next 4 months filtering into everything: food, water, clothing, the gap between a laptop screen and its keyboard, the tender membranes of the eyes and the nose. The visibility dropped to 300 meters, and the mountains, which were there, became invisible. The world contracted to what could be seen in this diminished range: the valley floor, the road, the shapes of trees at the edges. The 21 Brigade came at 8:40 a.m. 4 EPCs, 12 hilixes, infantry deployed in 2 columns from the road, spreading into the valley floor with the professional efficiency of soldiers who have done this many times. The numbers were significant, not because they exceeded what the mission required, but because the excess was itself a message, the message of a force that wants to establish, before anything else, what the power differential is. On the ridge above the valley, Obina's snipers were in position. Obina himself was at the forward observation point, watching the deployment below with the thermal tablet and the controlled, furious helplessness of a man who cannot act and knows it. He had been here since 4 a.m. He had 12 snipers, the best weapons in the militia's inventory. clear lines of sight to every vehicle in the valley. He had a single standing order, given to him by his own conscience, rather than by a chain of command: do not fire on Nigerian soldiers. Not these ones. Not anyone's. Whatever happened in the valley today, the Savannah Lions would not open fire on the Nigerian army. He watched. He prayed, which surprised him, and which he did not analyze. In the bowl of the mountain above the valley, Caleb stood with 40 people behind him. The 40, the remnant, the converted fighters, Tariq among them, standing on the right flank, holds the pacific bearing of man who is standing somewhere his former self could not have predicted, and is entirely committed to being there. The community members who had heard and come, and in back, 3 men that Caleb had not invited but who had arrived anyway. Father Dominic Abu, 71 years old, Catholic priest from Benue State, who had made the journey from Makurdi in a vehicle that should not have survived the roads, because he had heard what was happening and had decided that he had been a priest for 46 years, and this was the most priestly thing he had encountered in that time. Beside him, a young imam from Maiduguri, named Usman, who had been quietly supporting the Kinnis camp's work for 8 weeks through indirect means, and had decided that indirect means were no longer sufficient. And beside the imam, Reverend Pofi, who had driven from his air-conditioned house in Maiduguri to stand in the Harmattan dust on a mountain in Borno State, because whatever he was going to preach about from now on, he needed to have stood here. None of them were armed. The brigade's lieutenant colonel came forward with a loudhailer. He was 29 years old. He had graduated from NDA 8 years ago and had served in 3 theaters, and he was competent and professional, and had received his orders through proper channels, and had the proper attitude toward orders received through proper channels. He raised the loudhailer. Caleb Pam. The loudhailer gave his voice the official, impersonal quality of instructions. You are ordered to surrender immediately. All personnel under your command are to lay down arms and present themselves for processing. Non-compliance will result in the use of force. You have 5 minutes. He lowered the loudhailer and looked at the bowl. What he was looking at was 40 people. He could see this clearly even through the Harmattan haze. 40 people, standing, without visible weapons, in standard operational logic. This was a favorable situation. The target was visible, contained, unarmed. But there was something wrong with the standard operational logic, something that the training had not quite covered, which was the specific texture of what he was looking at. The 40 people were not standing in the posture of surrender. They were not standing in the posture of defiance either. They were standing in a third posture that he had no operational category for, a posture that was upright and forward-facing, and calm in a way that seemed, from his position, structurally impossible given the circumstances. Caleb turned to face his people. We are going to walk toward them, he said, hands open, eyes forward, and we are going to sing. He looked at Kimi. She looked back at him with the eyes of a woman who has done the thing she did and been forgiven for it, and has been trying, every day since, to become worthy of the forgiveness. She looked at him with love. She began to sing, Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. The voice of a nurse from Lagos, who had grown up singing this hymn every Sunday in her father's church, carrying it now across the Harmattan air of a mountain in Borno State, high and clear and without trembling. Other voices joined. Blessing's voice, which turned out to be a low, steady alto, Turka's voice, rough and sincere, Abu's voice, which was surprisingly, disarmingly, lovely. Kulu sang with her eyes closed and her left hand raised, the tattoo on her wrist visible, Tariq's voice, in Arabic, finding the melody of the same hymn that he had heard, in this camp, enough times to know its shape, mapping Arabic words to it, not the same words, other words, a prayer in the language he prayed in, but the same tune, the same reaching of the human voice towards something above itself. Father Abdullah's voice, an old man's voice, the voice of someone who has been singing for 71 years, and has arrived at the relationship with his own voice that long practice produces, not performance, but testimony. They walked, 40 people, singing, walking down from the bowl of the mountain into the Harmattan White Valley, where 4 APCs and 12 helixes and the 21 Brigade were deployed. The lieutenant colonel watched them come. He was receiving instructions in his earpiece. The commanding general, the voice of General Sani, through an intermediary, the voice of an order. He held his radio. He watched them reach the valley floor and keep coming. He watched a former ISWAP commander walking on the right flank of a column of unarmed Christians, and an elderly Catholic priest and a young imam singing. His radio was still in his hand. He had not raised it to his ear since the column began to descend. 40 meters from the front APC, Caleb stopped. The singing did not stop. It continued, the other voices carrying it, the sound of it rising into the Harmattan air and going somewhere that sound goes when there is nothing to contain it, wide and clear. "We are not your enemies," Caleb said, loudly enough to carry. His voice, in the open air, had a quality that it did not have in enclosed spaces. It carried differently, with a directness that the Harmattan air, strict of moisture, and therefore of the things that scatter and soften sound, delivered intact. "We have never been your enemies. We are the people who live here. We are the farmers and the nurses and the teachers and the priests and the pastors. And, yes, the men who used to point weapons at each other across a line that our enemies drew to keep us apart." He paused. "The man who sent you here today is named in a document that is currently being transmitted to journalists in Lagos, London, Washington, and Berlin. His name's there because he has been profiting from the deaths in this region for 6 years. He sent you here to destroy the one thing that cannot be bought or threatened or eliminated, the truth of what is happening, witnessed by too many people now to be silenced." The singing continued behind him. "Morning by morning, new mercies I see." The lieutenant colonel's hand was on the radio. He looked at the column. He looked at his men. Some of them were looking at the column with the expressions of men who have been given an order and have not yet found the interior mechanism to execute it. Some of them were looking at the ground. One of them, a young private near the 2nd APC, was recording on a phone that he had not been instructed to produce and that his sergeant had not yet noticed. The lieutenant colonel put down the radio. "Stand down," he said. He said it quietly. He said it to the men nearest him. The order spread by contagion, the way silence spreads, from person to person, the absence of an action, becoming a collective absence. The guns did not fire. In the ridge above the valley, Obina let out the breath he had been holding for 4 hours and 20 minutes. His hands, which had been entirely still for 4 hours and 20 minutes, moved to his face. He held his face in his hands for a long moment. Then he lowered his hands and looked at the valley, and the singing column, and the deployed brigade that was standing down, and he said something that he would not repeat in any account he gave of this day. He said it to God. He said, "All right." He said, "All right then." The Harmattan moved over the valley. The singing rose into it, and was carried, by the northeast wind, north and east, and into distances where the war was still happening, and the peace was still being built, note by note, with human hands, in a world that was terrible, and continuing, and, in small and specific and daily and undeniable ways, turning. Epilogue. Gwoza, Borno State. 14 months later, the church was not rebuilt. This was Caleb's decision, and not everyone understood it, and he did not explain it at length, because the length of the explanation would have made it sound more deliberate than it was. The truth was simpler. The shape of the thing that grew in the church's place was not planned. It was allowed. The community came together to rebuild, and what they built, in the organic way that communities build when they are not building to a specification, but to a need, was a space that was open on 2 sides, so that the mountain air moved freely through it. There were no pews. People sat on woven mats or on the low benches that Dachung's apprentices had made from the timber of trees that had fallen in the last rainy season. The walls that existed were low, and the light that came in over them was the full, unmediated light of a Borno sky. You could not trap people in this space. That was its defining quality, the quality that was, perhaps, its deepest form of theology. On a Sunday morning in the dry season, the congregation numbered 240 by approximate count, though the count was difficult because people came and went with the freedom of a space without doors. Among them, Turka and Agbu, who had not returned to their southern states, and who had become, without formal appointment, the representatives and liaisons of the Middle Belt communities, now connected by a network, whose formal name nobody had decided on, and whose actual function was the sharing of information, resources, and the testimony of what had happened here. Among them, Kulu, who sat in the fourth row with her hands in her lap and the name on her wrist, and an expression that had, over the past 14 months, begun to acquire something that was not contentment, but was in the general direction of it, the specific quality of a person who has found that purpose is sufficient, on most days, to carry them through the days, that purpose is not sufficient to carry them through. Among them, Gambo, who sat at the back, near an exit, which was still his way, and which he had stopped apologizing for. The case that Din's lawyer was building from the documents had been moving through the EFCC for 9 months, with the specific velocity of a legal process, in a country where the people named in the documents include the people who fund the institutions conducting the process. It was moving, slowly and imperfectly, and with setbacks that required fresh rounds of documentation and advocacy, but moving. Among them, Ta Chung, whose forge was now making plows as well as, less frequently, the other things, and who had taken on 4 apprentices from the surrounding community, young men learning a trade that was older than the conflict and would outlast it. Among them, Nen, who had accepted a position with a newly formed community legal aid organization based in Jos, and who made the drive to Goza once a month, because once a month he needed to see this place and be reminded of what the documents were for. Among them, 17 of the converted fighters, men from the Kindes camps who had remained. Some had returned to their home communities. Some had not been able to return. The homes were gone, or the families were gone, or they were afraid of what returning would mean. The 17 who remained had woven themselves into the community with the specific, careful gratitude of people who know the exact cost of what they have been given and are trying to live in a way that is proportionate to it. Tariq was not in the main congregation. He was at the edge of the structure, in the shade of the low wall, where he sat every Sunday. He did not sing. He did not participate in the prayers. But he was there, present, attentive, with the expression of someone who has been listening to something for long enough to begin to hear it differently. Caleb would not describe what was happening in Tariq's conversion. He would say, "Something is happening." He would say, "I was shown that it was possible." He would say, "The rest is not mine to manage." Reverend Pofia was in the congregation proper, which was itself a form of testimony. He had not given up his church in Maiduguri. He still preached there on the Sundays he was not here, and his congregation had noticed a change in his preaching that they described in different ways, but which consistently involved the word less comfortable, less managed, less abstract. More, something. They were still deciding what more something meant, but they were attending in larger numbers. Obina was not there. Obina was still in the field, still fighting, still sending terse radio messages of indeterminate emotional content that Caleb received and filed with gratitude. The Ledger's publication had changed the terrain of the war without ending it. Honorable Beatrice had been arrested, then released on bail, then rearrested, now in a process that had the lawyers working and the press watching, and the cartel's operations disrupted in ways that disruption had not previously disrupted them. General Sani had resigned from his various advisory roles and was, according to Vance's most recent transmission, currently the subject of an inquiry that was not the inquiry he would have written for himself. The cartel was not gone. It was reorganizing, finding new faces and new legal structures and new shell companies. This was the nature of the thing. It adapted. But adapting required resources and time, and a reduced confidence that the operations were invisible, and each of these requirements was a friction, and friction slowed things, and slowing things saved lives. Captain Vance was in Washington, in a review process that had been described, in various official communications, as both an inquiry into conduct and a commendation review, and whose outcome would determine whether he was dismissed or promoted, and which was taking so long that both possibilities were beginning to lose their meaning. He sent messages from a personal device, because his official communications were under review. The messages said, "The story is moving. Be careful. Be well." Blessing was in the congregation, in the plateau contingent's usual section, with 11 people who had come south with her and who had not gone back. She was not running logistics today. Today she was sitting with her hands in her lap, not counting anything, not assessing anything, simply being present in the service in a way that was new to her, and that she was deciding whether it suited her. She had decided in the past month that it did. Kemi sat in the front. The wedding fabric was out of the box. There had been a conversation, one evening, about when. There had been no answer to when, because when required a stability that the world around them was not yet providing. But the conversation had been had, and the fabric was out of the box, and this was itself a form of when. Caleb stood at the front of the open-sided church. He was dressed simply, the one good shirt, the same one, laundered and ironed by Kemi the previous evening while humming the song he had never been able to identify. The shirt had been repaired once, on the left shoulder, where the stitching showed if you looked closely, which was a thing Caleb had decided was fine. Evidence of repair was not a thing to conceal. He looked at his congregation for a long time. He looked at the mountains behind them, the Mandara mountains, still there, still vast, still holding the history of everything that had happened in their shadow, the attacks, the funerals, the training, the ambushes, the torture, the vision, the rescue, the raids and the singing and the standing down of guns. Still there, still watching, he opened his Bible, his father's Bible, Philippians 4, the margin note in the small, precise handwriting. "They took our peace, we will take it back." He looked at the note for a moment. He thought about his father, the arms spread wide, the magnificent and futile and entirely human gesture of protection. He thought about what his father had known, in that moment, and what he had chosen anyway. He thought, "We are the same, you and I just took a longer road to find it." He looked up. "The text," he said, "is Philippians 4:7. The peace that surpasses understanding." He paused. "I started a sermon on this text 8 months before everything I am about to describe happened, and I was interrupted before I could finish it. I have been finishing it ever since. This is still not the end of the sermon. I do not think the sermon ends." He looked at the congregation, at the converted fighters, at the displaced families, at Tariq in the shade. "But here is what I know today that I did not know when I started it. The peace Paul is describing is not a destination. It is not a condition you arrive at when the danger is over, when the wounds are healed, when the guilty have been prosecuted, and the land has been returned and the children are home. It is an active, forward-moving force that operates inside the danger and the wounds and the unresolved injustice. It is the peace that surpasses understanding, because understanding cannot get there on its own. Understanding says, the peace will come when the circumstances permit. This peace comes regardless." He looked at his hands. He said, "I have done things that I will carry for the rest of my life. I have trained men to kill, and some of those men are dead, and some of the people they killed are dead, and none of it can be undone. I have been in the grip of a darkness, that I made the mistake of fighting with darkness, and I have been shown, by a grace I did not earn, and cannot describe in language, that is equal to it, a different weapon. I am still learning how to hold it. I will probably be learning for the rest of my life. He looked at Kemi. He looked at the mountains. He said, "We are not finished. The land is still being taken. The people are still being displaced. The corrupt system that uses violence as a business instrument has not been dismantled. It has been disrupted, which is different, which is less, which is still more than nothing. The war continues." He said, "But love is winning, not quickly, not without cost, not in the way that winning usually looks. But there are men and women in this space today who were on the other side of the line 8 months ago, who were inside the machinery of the thing we are fighting, and who are here now. That is not nothing. That is, in fact, everything. That is the only thing that does not eventually lose." He closed the Bible. He let the silence hold for a moment. Then he said, "Let us sing." Someone began. It might have been Kemi. It might have been Father Abu, who was visiting today, whose old man's voice had a quality now that it had not had before, a quality of someone who has been to the edge of things and come back with the specific authority of that return. It might have been Tariq, in Arabic, in the shade. It might have been all of them. The singing rose from the open-sided church and went into the Mandara mountains and into the Harmattan sky and into the distances where the work continued and would continue past the borders of what could be planned or managed or predicted into the vast and ordinary and extraordinary fact of people choosing every day the thing they have been shown. The mountains kept their ancient watch. The red earth held its dead, and its roots, and its minerals, and its unmeasurable weight of human story. The morning moved over all of it. And in the open-sided church, and in the light that came from everywhere and had nothing to manage it, the singing continued. In memory of farmers, the pastors, the mothers, the teachers, all who have held the line in the Middle Belt and the northeast of Nigeria, paying with everything they had, asking only to be left in peace on the land of their ancestors. And for Leah Sharibu, still waiting, still praying, we have not forgotten.